Days before my 22nd birthday, I knew my sister would make something up to force my parents to cancel my plans. It had become a pattern I could not ignore anymore. So when they left me standing over the ruins of my own birthday cake to rush to her side for a fake emergency, I packed my bags and left for good. 9 years later, they walked into my multi-million-dollar event venue demanding a family discount. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to toxic family members who constantly put you last. Growing up in our sprawling brick home in an affluent Atlanta suburb meant projecting absolute perfection to the outside world. My parents, Vivian and Marcus, cared about exactly two things: their pristine status at our local megachurch, and my older sister, Kiara. To outsiders, we were the absolute picture of Black excellence. My father ran a highly profitable logistics firm, and my mother directed the church choir while hosting endless charity luncheons for her elite social circles. But inside those brick walls, the reality was suffocating and deeply divided. The house was essentially a museum dedicated entirely to Kiara. Her gleaming pageant trophies, her expensive sorority paddles, and professionally framed photographs dominated every mantel and wall space. I was the invisible daughter, the shadow living entirely in her blinding light. While Kiara spent her weekends attending exclusive mixers and maintaining our family flawless public image, I was the one stuck at home doing the heavy lifting. I prepared the elaborate Sunday dinners that my mother took credit for. I scrubbed the baseboards and polished the silver before Vivian hosted her prayer group meetings. I painstakingly ironed the choir robes until my fingers ached. My parents viewed me as built-in household help rather than their child. Whenever I tried to express my own dreams or showcase my talents, Vivian would wave her hand dismissively and tell me to go check on the roast in the oven. "You are the practical one, Nia," she would say with a condescending sigh. "Kiara is the face of this family, so she needs her rest to shine." It was a bitter, toxic pill to swallow every single day of my youth. My 22nd birthday fell on an intensely humid Saturday in late July. I had not asked for a party or a dinner or even a gift. I knew much better than to ask for anything that would temporarily pull attention away from Kiara. She had recently married Brad, an incredibly arrogant and insufferable investment banker from Wall Street. Their lavish lifestyle and his proximity to wealth was my mother's absolute favorite topic of conversation at any gathering. All I wanted for my birthday was one quiet, peaceful evening at home, with a cake I was baking entirely from scratch. It was a highly complex recipe I had spent weeks practicing and perfecting. A rich, layered red velvet cake with an elaborate vanilla cream cheese frosting. I had spent my own hard-earned money from my late-night hospitality shifts to buy the premium ingredients. Baking was my escape, my quiet rebellion against a house that constantly demanded my subservience. I was standing in the center of our massive kitchen, meticulously piping the final intricate borders of white frosting around the base of the cake. The house was blissfully quiet for once. I was actually smiling, feeling a rare and precious moment of peace and genuine pride in my creation. Then the heavy oak front door slammed open with such violent force that the framed pictures in the long hallway violently rattled against the drywall. Vivian and Marcus rushed into the kitchen like a destructive hurricane. My mother was frantically clutching her expensive designer purse, her face twisted in a theatrical mask of sheer panic. "Move out of the way, Nia!" she screamed, pushing roughly past me to rummage through the cluttered key drawer. "Kiara is in absolute agony. We have to drive to her house right this second. She is having terrible stomach pains and she thinks she might be losing the baby." I completely froze, the heavy piping bag suspended midair in my hands. Kiara was not pregnant, or at least she had never announced any pregnancy to the family. Moreover, I had spoken to her closest friend just an hour earlier. That friend had casually mentioned that Kiara had eaten some questionable raw oysters at a pretentious country club brunch and was simply dealing with a basic case of food poisoning. The emergency room doctor had already told her over the phone that it was just mild indigestion and she needed to rest. I tried to inject some basic logic and reason into the sudden chaos. "Mom," I said calmly, setting the frosting bag down on the granite counter. "I just heard she ate some bad seafood at the club. The doctor said she is perfectly fine. It is literally just a stomachache. You do not need to panic and drop everything." The exact moment those logical words left my mouth, the atmosphere in the kitchen turned violently hostile. Vivian spun around, her eyes flashing with a terrifying, unhinged rage. "How dare you undermine your sister? Terrible pain!" she yelled, her shrill voice echoing sharply off the expensive tile walls. "You are completely heartless and cruel. She is suffering over there, and you are standing here playing with stupid sugar paste like a child." My father Marcus stepped forward, his jaw tight with explosive fury. He looked at me with a level of pure disgust that physically took my breath away. He did not see a young daughter trying to quietly celebrate her birthday. He only saw an obstacle, an ungrateful, defiant child standing in the way of his golden girl's constant need for attention. Without a single word of warning or hesitation, Marcus swept his large, heavy hand forcefully across the kitchen island. His broad palm connected directly with the heavy glass cake stand. I watched in horrified, agonizing slow motion as the beautiful red velvet cake, the one I had spent 4 grueling hours creating, flew through the air. It crashed onto the hardwood floor with a sickening heavy thud. Bright red crumbs and thick white frosting splattered violently across the cherry wood cabinets, across my clean shoes, and all over the pristine floor I had scrubbed on my hands and knees just that very morning. The glass stand shattered into dozens of sharp, jagged pieces that scattered across the room. I stood perfectly still, staring blankly at the ruined, disastrous mess at my feet. The physical destruction of the cake was devastating, but the emotional violence behind the deliberate act shattered something deep and fundamental inside my soul. That cake was the one tiny small thing I had claimed for myself on my special day, and my father had destroyed it without a single second of thought or remorse. "Clean up this disgusting garbage," Vivian sneered cruelly, not even glancing down at the floor or acknowledging my silent pain. "We are leaving right now." Marcus grabbed the car keys from the drawer and walked purposefully toward the garage door. He paused momentarily, turning his head back to look at me standing paralyzed over the ruined cake. "You are a grown adult now, Nia," he barked, his voice entirely cold and completely devoid of any parental warmth. "It is high time you stop being so incredibly selfish and start putting this family first for a change." The heavy oak garage door slammed shut, cutting off the last echoing traces of my father's voice. I stood alone in the center of the kitchen, the absolute silence ringing in my ears louder than a blaring siren. Red velvet crumbs lay scattered across the imported Italian tile like a fresh crime scene. Thick white cream cheese frosting smeared across the toes of my sensible black work shoes. I looked down at my hands. They were perfectly steady. There was no tremor, no sudden rush of hot, humiliating tears, no desperate, suffocating urge to scream. For the first time in 22 years, my chest felt completely hollowed out, entirely swept clean of the pathetic, desperate need to be loved by people who only saw me as an appliance. I turned my back on the ruined cake and walked out of the kitchen. The imaginary camera of my mind seemed to detach, dropping low to follow the sharp, rhythmic click of my heels against the polished Brazilian hardwood floor. Each step was a precise, calculated strike. I moved past the grand dining room with its imported crystal chandelier, past the formal living room with its velvet sofas no one was ever allowed to actually sit on, and began my ascent up the sweeping, curved staircase. The walls on either side of the heavy mahogany banister were a dedicated gallery of my sister's lifelong triumphs. I passed a massive framed portrait of Kiara in her sparkling diamond-studded pageant gown, her smile wide and victorious. I stepped past a shadow box displaying her heavy gold-lettered sorority sash. I walked past the professional canvas-wrapped photographs of her recent wedding to her arrogant, insufferable husband Brad. There was not a single photograph of my high school graduation on this wall. There was not a single trace of my existence in this entire massive house. I kept my eyes locked straight ahead, focusing only on the heavy, rhythmic thud of my own breathing, echoing in the empty, silent cavern of the hallway. I pushed open the door to my bedroom. It was the smallest room in the house, tucked far away at the very end of the second-floor corridor, entirely devoid of the custom crown, molding the plush imported carpets, and the massive walk-in closets that graced the other bedroom suites. I pulled a battered navy blue suitcase from beneath the plain twin bed. It was the same cheap scuffed luggage I had purchased from a discount store years ago for a brief high school debate trip. I unzipped the main compartment with a harsh metallic rip that sliced cleanly through the quiet room. I moved with the ruthless mechanical efficiency of a soldier breaking down a hostile camp. I did not fold anything. I ripped my dark, stiff hospitality uniforms off their cheap plastic hangers and shoved them aggressively into the fabric corners of the suitcase. I grabbed the sturdy, comfortable kitchen shoes I had bought with my own meager wages. I opened the dresser drawers and bypassed the few frilly pastel blouses my mother had given me for Christmas years ago, the ones that were clearly bought with Kiara's taste and sizing in mind. I wanted absolutely nothing they had paid for. I wanted zero physical ties to their vast wealth, their immaculate house, or their highly conditional toxic charity. I swept my minimal basic toiletries into a clear plastic bag. I grabbed my worn, heavy sketchbooks filled with culinary blueprints, complex business plans, and massive event layouts, tossing them roughly over the disorganized pile of dark clothing. Suddenly, my phone vibrated violently against the hard wooden surface of the nightstand. The bright screen illuminated the dark, shadowy corner of the room. It was a direct message from Kiara. I paused, my hand hovering stiffly over the heavy brass zipper of my suitcase. A tiny, foolish, deeply ingrained fragment of my childhood conditioning actually wondered if she was apologizing, if the fake medical emergency had suddenly become a moment of genuine family guilt. I reached out and swiped the glass screen open. It was a high-definition picture message. A brightly lit, perfectly angled selfie. Kiara was sitting comfortably in a plush, tufted leather booth at an incredibly upscale, highly exclusive seafood restaurant downtown. Her expensive makeup was totally flawless, her skin glowing, her smile wide and completely devoid of any physical pain or distress. She was holding up a massive, freshly cracked red lobster claw directly to the camera lens. Behind her, slightly out of focus but undeniably present, were my parents. Vivian was holding a tall crystal glass of chilled white wine, laughing brightly at something off camera. Marcus was pointing at the leather-bound menu, his posture completely relaxed, his face completely free of the unhinged explosive rage he had directed at me just 20 minutes ago. Beneath the glowing photograph was a short, devastatingly crisp text message. I was so completely exhausted from the heat, so Mom and Dad took me out for some fresh seafood to recover. Happy birthday, loser. I stared intensely at the glowing pixels on the screen. The sheer, unapologetic, sociopathic cruelty of that specific message did not break my heart. It did not shatter my spirit. Instead, it set it completely, permanently free. The phantom, agonizing stomach pains, the highly dramatic, frantic exit from the kitchen, the violent physical destruction of the only single thing I had claimed for myself on my birthday. It was all a meticulously calculated, expertly executed performance designed entirely to ruin my day. And my parents had eagerly, enthusiastically, and blindly played their starring roles. A short, dry laugh escaped the back of my throat. It sounded foreign, sharp, and entirely dangerous in the quiet room. I tossed the phone face down onto the bare mattress, leaving the screen glowing uselessly against the fabric, and zipped the heavy suitcase shut with a forceful, definitive pull. I was no longer packing for a simple trip. I was actively erasing a ghost from the premises. I turned back to the room and stripped the plain blue sheets off the bed, folding them into a harsh, tight, rigid square, leaving the stark white, bare mattress fully exposed to the air. I grabbed a rag and wiped down the cheap imitation wood vanity, throwing away the generic lotions, the loose hair ties, and the stray receipts into the small metal trash can, until the surface was completely barren and gleaming. I looked around the square room one final time. It looked exactly like a cheap, roadside motel room after a brief, entirely forgettable stay. There was absolutely no tangible proof that a young woman named Nia had spent 22 grueling years of her life surviving inside these four walls. I grabbed the heavy, thick plastic handle of the suitcase. I did not look back over my shoulder as I crossed the threshold. I hauled the luggage down the long hallway and approached the grand staircase, the heavy rubber wheels bumping loudly and aggressively against each polished wooden step. The heavy rhythmic sound echoed loudly through the empty, cavernous millions of dollars worth of real estate, a steady marching drumbeat signaling my final permanent departure. I marched straight down the main hallway, ignoring the family portraits, and stepped back into the sprawling kitchen. The oppressive, thick, highly humid air of an impending Georgia summer thunderstorm was already pressing heavily against the large custom window panes. The red velvet cake was still a murdered, crushed mess on the floor, the bright white frosting already beginning to harden and crack in the cold blast of the central air conditioning. I walked deliberately over to the pristine imported marble island in the absolute center of the kitchen. I reached deep into the front pocket of my denim jeans and pulled out a crumpled, faded, slightly torn $20 bill. It was my hard-earned tip money from serving arrogant, entitled people exactly like my sister during a grueling 14-hour shift the night before. I smoothed the green paper out meticulously, with the flat of my palm pressing it firmly against the cold, expensive polished stone. Right next to the cash, I placed my heavy brass house key. The thick metal clinked sharply, a final ringing note against the hard marble surface. I pulled a small, bright yellow sticky note from the organized utility drawer and grabbed a thick black permanent marker. I did not write a long, emotional manifesto. I did not pour out my broken heart, or demand basic justice, or beg for an apology they were entirely biologically incapable of giving. I simply pressed the dark felt tip to the yellow paper and wrote 4 words with heavy, dark, unapologetic, forceful strokes. Refund for the cake. Bye. I slapped the bright yellow note directly on top of the green $20 bill, pressing my thumb firmly into the center so it would stick perfectly to the stone. I gripped my suitcase handle, my knuckles turning stark white with the sheer physical force of my grip, and turned my back on the kitchen for the last time. I pushed the heavy, solid oak front door wide open. The dark, swollen sky had cracked completely open. A torrential, blinding sheet of violent summer rain was coming down in thick, heavy, unrelenting waves, instantly flooding the perfectly manicured, sweeping concrete driveway. A massive crack of thunder rumbled deeply in the distance, violently shaking the ground beneath my feet. I stepped out from under the safe, dry cover of the massive porch and walked straight into the raging storm. The icy, freezing rain soaked instantly through my thin cotton shirt, plastering my dark hair flat against my face and chilling me to the absolute bone. But as the rushing water washed the remaining smears of sweet white frosting off my black work shoes, I closed my eyes and took a deep, shuddering, expansive breath of the electric ozone-filled air. I was soaking wet, carrying a single cheap suitcase and walking directly into the complete unknown. I had absolutely nothing to my name. And for the very first time in my entire existence, I had absolutely everything I ever needed. A deafening crack of thunder shatters the sky, ripping the dark, swollen clouds apart, as the heavy oak door slams violently shut against the torrential Georgia storm. A blinding, pure white flash of lightning completely engulfs the screen. The deafening roar of the rain blurs into a chaotic, spinning vortex of sound and light. The camera executes a savage, high-velocity whip pan, blurring time and space until the violent storm abruptly cuts to total silence. The scene snaps into razor-sharp focus on a pair of immaculate red-soled stilettos stepping onto a floor of pitch-black, flawlessly polished Nero Marquina marble. The heavy, imposing, solid oak doors of an executive suite, heavily gilded with brushed brass accents, swing open with a silent, synchronized grace. The Steadicam instantly locks onto its target, gliding smoothly and rapidly backward, staying just inches ahead of the sharp, rhythmic, predatory click of those heels. 9 grueling, transformative years have passed. The terrified, soaking wet, shattered 22-year-old girl clutching a crumpled $20 bill has been entirely eradicated from the face of the earth. In her place strides Nia. She is 31 years old, an absolute vision of terrifying, calculated power. She is not an engineer. She is not a carpenter. She is a conqueror. She wears a tailored, razor-sharp, dark emerald pantsuit that looks forged rather than sewn, a garment designed to command the oxygen in any room she enters. Her posture is impossibly rigid, her dark hair swept back into a sleek, severe style, her gaze a lethal, unyielding force. She moves down the grand, vaulted corridor with the effortless, terrifying momentum of an apex predator patrolling her domain. This is Obsidian. As the camera tracks backward, the sheer staggering magnitude of her creation unfolds in the periphery of the frame. Obsidian is not merely a venue. It is an architectural and culinary fortress, the most exclusive, impenetrable, elite hospitality complex in the country. It is a sprawling empire of ultra-luxury private event spaces, subterranean wine vaults, and a trio of Michelin-caliber tasting rooms hidden behind unmarked, heavily fortified doors. The acoustic design of the hallway ensures that even the clinking of crystal glasses from the distant dining rooms sounds like a symphony. Rare commissioned artwork lines the dark, dramatic walls. Billionaires, foreign dignitaries, and Hollywood royalty wait years for a single reservation, eagerly handing over six-figure deposits just for the privilege of walking through the front gates. And they do it entirely blindly. Obsidian operates under a labyrinthine, ironclad web of blind trusts and protective LLC structures. Wall Street titans constantly try to buy it. Elite magazines offer fortunes for exclusive interviews. Yet the corporate veil remains totally impenetrable. The public face of Obsidian is a board of highly paid, impeccably dressed legal directors. Absolutely no one in the outside world knows the true identity, the face, or the history of the ghost CEO who built it all from scratch. Assistants clad in sharp, uniform black attire peel away from the discreet alcoves, falling into perfect, synchronized step beside her. The corridor buzzes with controlled, high-stakes energy. "Good morning, Ms. Vance," a junior coordinator murmurs, handing off a glowing digital tablet without breaking stride. Nia fires off directives with ruthless surgical precision. Her voice is smooth, cold, and entirely devoid of hesitation. She approves the acquisition of a highly contested $3 million private vineyard estate in Bordeaux. She casually denies a massive pop star's frantic plea to rent the rooftop garden for a private release party, citing a minor breach of the venue's strict aesthetic dress code. She demands a complete recalibration of the ambient lighting schematic for a visiting prime minister's reception, spotting a fractional error in the color temperature from a preliminary photograph. She is a machine of pure, unadulterated excellence. Her senior executive assistant, a sharply dressed, hyper-vigilant man named Elias, catches her pace. He does not hold a digital tablet. Instead, he carries a premium, heavy linen embossed physical dossier. This indicates an anomaly, a disruption in the standard operational flow. "We have a slight friction point with a prospective client, Ms. Vance." Elias states, his tone carefully measured, keeping pace with her rapid strides. "The event management division has rejected an application twice already due to the client's combative, highly demanding behavior. However, the applicant has bypassed the lower tier completely. He sent a physical courier to the corporate office this morning. He is demanding to rent the Grand Obsidian Ballroom for a massive $50 million private equity fundraising gala." Nia does not slow down. She keeps her eyes locked dead ahead on the end of the long, luxurious corridor. "We do not reward tantrums, Elias. If event management rejected him, the rejection stands. Tell security to flag his name. Have him permanently blacklisted from all Obsidian properties." "I was about to authorize the blacklist," Elias replies smoothly, opening the heavy linen folder. "But the client is aggressive. He is a senior partner at a very predatory Wall Street investment firm. He attached a blank signed cashier's check to the application. He explicitly wrote that he does not care what the venue costs. He simply demands the prestige of the Obsidian name for his investors. He insists on appealing directly to the unseen owner. Nia lets out a short, dry, perfectly controlled scoff. Wealthy, arrogant men throwing money around like a blunt instrument were a daily occurrence in her world. They always assumed that enough cash could unlock any door, completely ignorant of the fact that the woman holding the keys possessed wealth that dwarfed their own. A blank check is just a loud admission of insecurity, Nia states coldly. Shred it. Send the shredded pieces back to his office via standard mail. Understood. Elias nods, preparing to close the folder. I will inform Mr. Bradley Sterling's office immediately. Nia stops walking. She stops so abruptly that the entire perfectly synchronized entourage of assistants freezes in their tracks behind her. The kinetic buzzing energy of the hallway instantly drops to a dead, suffocating silence. The name hits the air, ringing out like a gunshot in a quiet cathedral. Nia turns her head slowly. The Steadicam circles her, capturing the sudden dangerous shift in the atmosphere. She extends her hand. Elias, recognizing the silent command, immediately places the open linen dossier into her palm. Nia looks down at the crisp, heavy paper. The executive summary details the aggressive, highly lucrative operations of a ruthless Wall Street firm. Clipped to the top of the financial breakdown is a glossy, high-definition corporate photograph of the applicant. He is a perfectly groomed, aggressively tanned, classically arrogant white man in a bespoke pinstriped Italian suit. He has the kind of smug, entitled smile that practically screams generational wealth and profound, unchecked privilege. Nia stares at the photograph. The hollow, empty cavern in her chest, the void she had carried out into the freezing Georgia rain 9 years ago, suddenly flares with a brilliant, white-hot intensity. It is him. It is the man from the framed canvas-wrapped photographs lining the curved staircase of her parents' mansion. It is the arrogant, insufferable man who had draped his arm around Kiara's waist, smiling victoriously in a house that actively sought to erase Nia's existence. It is Brad, her brother-in-law. The sheer breathtaking irony of the universe washes over her in a glorious, intoxicating wave. The toxic, abusive family that had treated her like a worthless, invisible appliance, the sister who had gleefully celebrated her destruction, the people who had quite literally driven her out into a storm with $20 to her name, they are now directly tied to the man desperately throwing blank checks at her doorstep. Brad thinks he can buy his way into the impenetrable fortress of obsidian. He is completely blissfully unaware that the untouchable godlike chairman he is so desperately begging to impress is the very same sister-in-law his family had thrown away like trash. The camera pushes in tight on Nia's face. The cold, rigid executive mask cracks. A slow, highly dangerous, utterly chilling smirk curves the corners of her dark painted lips. It is a smile that promises absolute systematic devastation. She steps toward a thick, custom-cut, heavy glass console table resting against the dark hallway wall. She drops the dossier onto the surface. She leans forward, resting her hands on the edge of the glass. She lifts her right hand. She taps her meticulously manicured dark crimson fingernail sharply against the hard, cold glass. The heavy, rhythmic click echoes loudly through the silent, luxurious corridor, sounding exactly like the ticking of a countdown clock. She tilts her head, her dark eyes locking onto Elias. Her voice drops to a smooth, lethal velvet register that promises total, absolute ruin. Approve the application, but tell him the chairman requires a mandatory in-person menu tasting. The camera drops low to the ground, pressing flush against the gleaming, flawless black marble of the obsidian grand foyer. From this sharp upward perspective, the massive custom-forged bronze entrance doors part with a muted, expensive hiss. 3 figures stride into the dimly lit, hyper-exclusive sanctuary, their silhouettes stretched and magnified by the dramatic uplighting, projecting an aura of aggressive, entirely unearned superiority. Brad leads the pack. His custom Italian leather Oxfords strike the polished stone with loud, heavy thuds that disrupt the cathedral-like silence of the lobby. He wears his money like a loud, obnoxious weapon. A flashy platinum watch catches the ambient light as he adjusts his perfectly tailored, aggressive pinstripe suit. He moves with the swaggering, toxic confidence of a Wall Street predator who genuinely believes his blank check has just conquered the most impenetrable fortress in the city. Right behind him, clinging to his arm with practiced elegance, is Kiara. Her designer stilettos click sharply against the floor. She is draped in a clinging champagne-colored silk dress that screams new money, her hair styled in voluminous, perfect waves. She looks around the breathtaking, shadowy architecture of obsidian, not with awe, but with a greedy, calculating hunger, mentally calculating the net worth of the patrons hidden behind the frosted glass partitions. Trailing closely behind them is Vivian. My mother marches into the establishment with a rigid, hyper-vigilant posture. Her eyes dart nervously across the sophisticated minimalist decor, instantly assessing the environment to ensure their family projects the absolute peak of affluent success. She is wearing a stiff, overly formal Chanel suit that looks far too rigid for an evening tasting. Elias, playing his role with terrifying icy perfection, approaches the trio. He offers a slight practiced bow and escorts them past the heavily guarded velvet ropes, leading them through a labyrinth of dark acoustic paneled corridors toward the private tasting vaults. Brad speaks loudly, his voice echoing off the rare commissioned artwork, boasting to Elias about his massive upcoming fund and how he fully expects the chairman to roll out the red carpet for his investors. Elias simply nods, his expression a mask of professional blankness, and opens the heavy oak doors to the tasting room. The room is spectacular. A massive slab of raw, polished obsidian serves as the dining table, illuminated by a single dramatic spotlight. The surrounding walls are lined with thousands of rare vintage wines, locked behind climate-controlled glass. As they take their seats in the plush leather chairs, Vivian immediately leans across the dark stone table. Her hands dart out aggressively, tugging at the neckline of Kiara's silk dress, smoothing out an entirely invisible wrinkle near her shoulder. "Sit up straight, Kiara," Vivian hisses, her voice a sharp, urgent whisper echoing in the quiet room. "Fix your posture right now. You are representing this family today. Investors will not appreciate a sloppy wife. We are sitting in the most exclusive room in the city, and you need to look the part. Do not give these wealthy white men any reason to look down on us." Kiara rolls her eyes, swatting her mother's manicured hands away with an irritated huff. "I look flawless, Mom. Stop fussing." Brad already secured the venue with his check. "We are basically giving this chairman a favor by bringing our $50 million gala here. They should be the ones worried about impressing us." Brad chuckles, leaning back in his chair and throwing one ankle casually over his knee. "Your daughter is right, Vivian. Money talks. I threw a blank check at their corporate office this morning. That is why we bypassed the 6-month waiting list. This unseen chairman knows a massive payout when he sees one. He probably wants to personally beg for our business." The heavy, soundproof oak doors at the end of the room suddenly unlatch. The heavy brass handles turn with a solid, definitive click. Brad immediately sits up, straightening his tie, slapping a fake, charming, high-stakes smile onto his face, fully prepared to greet the elusive, godlike billionaire who owns Obsidian. Vivian holds her breath, freezing in a picture-perfect posture of elite grace. Kiara touches her hair, angling her face to catch the spotlight. The doors swing wide open. I step into the room. I am not wearing my dark emerald power suit. I am not wearing the sharp, intimidating stilettos of a corporate titan. Instead, I am wearing a pristine, stark white, double-breasted executive hospitality uniform. The fabric is impeccably tailored, hugging my frame perfectly, with a discreet earpiece tucked into my left ear and a sleek black digital tablet resting in the crook of my arm. My hair is pulled back into a tight, severe bun, completely devoid of any flashy jewelry or obvious markers of extreme wealth. To the untrained, arrogant eye, I look exactly like a highly competent, well-paid servant. I stop at the head of the obsidian table. I fold my hands neatly over the digital tablet and offer a polite, clinically professional smile. The reaction is instantaneous and glorious. Vivian literally gasps, her hand flying up to cover her mouth. The perfectly cultivated mask of elite sophistication shatters into a million pieces. Her eyes widen in sheer, unadulterated horror as she stares at my face. She looks wildly around the luxurious room, her breathing turning shallow and panicked, terrified that the wealthy investors or the elite staff might suddenly connect her to the disgraced runaway daughter she had permanently erased from her pristine family narrative. Kiara simply stares. She blinks once, twice, and then the shock violently morphs into pure, unhinged amusement. Kiara throws her head back and lets out a sharp, piercing bark of genuine laughter. The sound is ugly and loud, completely shattering the sophisticated ambiance of the tasting vault. She points a manicured finger directly at my crisp white uniform, her shoulders shaking with malicious delight. "Oh my God!" Kiara gasps, struggling to catch her breath between cruel giggles. "You work here. You are the one serving us." Brad lets out a low, booming chuckle, shaking his head as he looks me up and down with intense, unfiltered disdain. He leans back, crossing his arms over his chest, absolutely reveling in his perceived dominance. He had expected to negotiate with a titan of industry, but finding his estranged, supposedly destitute sister-in-law waiting to take his order is a power trip he cannot resist. I maintain my perfectly pleasant, entirely vacant customer service smile. I do not flinch. I do not break eye contact. "Welcome to Obsidian," I say, my voice smooth, modulated, and completely devoid of any familial recognition. "I am the culinary and hospitality director assigned to your tasting this evening. I will be guiding you through the menu selections for your proposed gala." Vivian looks like she might actually vomit. She leans forward, her voice a harsh, venomous whisper. "What are you doing here, Nia? How dare you show your face to us? If you ruin this deal for Brad, if you do anything to embarrass this family in front of the owners of this establishment, I swear to God I will have you fired." I ignore the threat completely. I tap the screen of my tablet, bringing up their event file. "The chairman is exceptionally particular about who utilizes the grand ballroom," I state calmly, looking directly at Brad. "He requires a mandatory in-person tasting to ensure the client's palate and behavior align with the core values of Obsidian. I am here to facilitate his final decision." Kiara snorts, picking up her crystal water glass. "So you are just a glorified waitress taking notes for the real boss." "Typical. Mom always said you would end up fetching plates for successful people." Brad waves his hand dismissively, cutting his wife off. He leans heavily onto the table, projecting an air of supreme, untouchable authority. He looks at me as if I am a particularly amusing insect he is considering crushing beneath his expensive shoe. "Well, at least you found a stable job serving people. Make sure to tell your staff not to spill wine on the investors' shoes." I look at him. I look at the man who thinks he holds the keys to my kingdom. I bow my head slightly, maintaining the absolute perfect, flawless facade of a compliant, obedient subordinate. A slow, chilling smile curves my lips. "Yes, Brad." The heavy, suffocating silence stretches across the private tasting vault. The raw obsidian table gleams under the single dramatic spotlight, reflecting the tense, distorted faces of the family sitting around it. I do not blink. I do not drop the perfectly vacant, highly compliant smile that rests on my lips. I bow my head a fraction of an inch, the ultimate picture of a subdued, obedient subordinate. "Yes, Brad." My voice is a smooth, robotic hum, betraying absolutely none of the violent tectonic shifts occurring beneath the surface. I step back, fading into the shadows of the room, and raise my right hand, giving a sharp, silent cue. The heavy oak doors swing open in perfect unison. A highly choreographed brigade of servers enters the vault. They move like phantoms, their footsteps entirely silent on the dark marble floor. They approach the table, simultaneously lowering heavy, textured slate plates in front of Brad, Kiara, and Vivian. "For your first course," I state, projecting my voice from the shadows with practiced theatrical grace, "we have prepared a charred wild-caught sea bass, resting on a reduction of heirloom red peas, finished with a smoked Scotch bonnet and plantain emulsion. It is a signature introductory plate designed to awaken the palate with bold historical diaspora profiles." Brad stares down at the slate plate. He does not pick up his heavy silver fork. Instead, he extends his index finger and physically pushes the plate an inch away from his chest, an overt gesture of profound disgust. He clicks his tongue against his teeth, leaning back in his plush leather chair and crossing his arms. He looks at the food and then he looks directly at me, his eyes filled with a toxic, unfiltered condescension. "It is aggressive," Brad states flatly. His voice is loud, meant to bounce off the walls and assert his total dominance over the room. The spices, the ingredients. It lacks a certain refinement. Do you not think my investors are managing billions in capital? They fly in from London, Zurich, Geneva. They expect classical, elevated European profiles, not something that tastes like a backyard cookout in a bad neighborhood. The camera cuts sharply to a tight close-up of Elias standing just over Brad's right shoulder in the dim lighting. Elias is holding a bottle of Reserve Vintage Bordeaux, waiting to pour the first pairing. As Brad's words hang in the air, Elias's grip tightens violently around the neck of the dark glass bottle. His knuckles turn a stark bone white. A distinct, uncontrollable tremor of pure, unadulterated rage shakes his hand. Elias knows exactly who designed this menu. He knows the sheer, unparalleled brilliance of the woman standing before them. The overt racist disrespect shown to his CEO is physically repulsive to him. The camera executes a rapid, seamless whip pan away from Elias's trembling hand, snapping directly onto my face. I am a portrait of absolute freezing stillness. Not a single muscle in my jaw twitches. My eyes remain dead dark and utterly devoid of emotion. Vivian immediately leans in over the dark stone table. Her breathing becomes frantic and shallow. She is desperate to appease the wealthy white man sitting beside her, terrified that this menu will reflect poorly on her own carefully cultivated, highly policed image. She shoots a venomous, panicked glare at me. "He is entirely right, Nia." Vivian snaps her tone sharp, dripping with internalized shame and respectability politics. "You need to understand your audience. These are high net worth individuals. They are important people. They do not want this heavily spiced ethnic food. You need to tell your kitchen staff to westernize the menu immediately. Bring out something sophisticated. Truffles, caviar, traditional French techniques. Do not embarrass us with this unrefined display. You are going to ruin Brad's event." Kiara lets out a dramatic theatrical sigh, pushing her plate away completely to join her husband in his boycott. She adjusts a heavy diamond bracelet on her wrist, a gift clearly bought with Brad's money. "Honestly, Nia," Kiara sneers, looking me up and down with intense pity, "I thought working at a luxury place like this would finally teach you some class. But you are still trying to serve the same heavy, cheap stuff you used to make in your tiny apartment. I cannot eat this. I refuse to bloat before the gala." I do not react to the insults. I do not defend the menu. I simply tap the screen of my digital tablet twice. "I apologize for the oversight." I respond smoothly, my tone dripping with manufactured customer service regret. "I will have the culinary team adjust the flavor profiles immediately. We will pivot to a traditional sterile Parisian progression for the remainder of the tasting." I gesture to the servers. They step forward instantly, removing the untouched plates of food and vanishing back through the heavy oak doors. Minutes later, the second course arrives. It is a visually stunning but entirely safe, unimaginative presentation of poached scallops in a white wine reduction, topped with a meaningless sprinkle of caviar. Brad nods approvingly. He slices into the seafood with a smug, triumphant sense of victory. He has established his dominance. He has successfully put the servant in her place. "Much better," Brad says, pointing his silver knife directly at my chest. "See, when you actually listen to your betters, you get results. Which brings me to the real reason we are sitting in this room tonight." He drops his knife. He leans back, interlacing his fingers over his stomach. The absolute arrogance radiating from his posture is suffocating. He looks at me as if I am a particularly amusing tool he is about to use for manual labor. "This gala is going to bring $50 million of capital into my private equity firm," Brad announces, his voice booming with unchecked ego. "I am bringing the most powerful, wealthy men in the country into this building. I am doing Obsidian a massive favor by providing this level of elite exposure. But I saw the venue fee on the application you sent my office. $500,000 for one night." He lets out a harsh, mocking laugh, shaking his head. That is highway robbery. I am not paying $500,000 to rent a room, even a room this nice. I want a 40% discount. 300,000. Flat. I maintain my empty professional smile, holding the digital tablet flat against my chest. The chairman has established strict, non-negotiable pricing tiers for the Grand Ballroom Brad. The fee covers exclusive access, advanced security protocols, and bespoke culinary execution. We do not alter the rates. Vivian slams her open palm onto the obsidian table. The sharp smack cracks through the quiet room like a whip. She glares at me with unmasked, vicious fury. Do not speak to him like that, Vivian hisses, her face contorting with rage. He is family. He took your sister out of a cramped, pathetic apartment and gave her a life of absolute luxury. He elevated our entire family's status. The least you can do is be useful for once in your miserable life. You work here. You have access to management. You will go to your boss, or this unseen chairman, or whoever handles the numbers, and you will secure that discount. Kiara smirks, picking up her crystal wine glass and swirling the dark red liquid. Come on, Nia. Do not be useless. Tell them we are VIPs. Tell them you know us. Or do they not even listen to the help in this place? Brad chuckles, taking a slow, arrogant sip of his wine. He locks eyes with me, his gaze dripping with entitlement. I am not asking Nia. I am telling you. You owe this family. You owe Kiara for trying to ruin her birthday all those years ago. You are going to secure that 40% discount, and you are going to make sure the service is flawless. Make it happen, or I will find the manager myself, and make sure you are looking for a new job by tomorrow morning. The air in the tasting vault turns dangerously cold. It is the kind of heavy, freezing atmospheric drop that precedes a massive, devastating avalanche. I do not blink. I do not sigh. I reach down and run my finger across the smooth glass of my tablet. I tap the screen once. Elias immediately steps forward from the shadows. He moves with terrifying precision. He reaches inside his tailored suit jacket and withdraws a heavy, thick, matte black envelope. He places it directly onto the obsidian table, sliding it until it rests exactly 1 inch from Brad's plate. Brad looks down at the envelope, a confused frown replacing his smug smile. What is this? I step forward, stepping out of the shadows and into the edge of the spotlight. I rest my hands lightly on the cold stone table. My voice remains perfectly pleasant, entirely accommodating, and utterly lethal. I have just authorized the 40% discount on the venue fee. I state smoothly, watching the immediate shock register on their faces. The total cost for the evening will be officially reduced to $300,000. Brad's frown vanishes. He smiles broadly, shooting a victorious, vindicated look at Vivian and Kiara. See, I told you. Money talks. The help just needed a little push. However, I continue, my voice cutting through his celebration like a serrated blade. Brad stops smiling. His eyes snap back to me. Elias reaches forward and slides the heavy black envelope open. He extracts a thick, impeccably printed legal contract. The edges of the heavy linen paper are heavily gilded in pure gold. He positions the contract precisely in front of Brad, placing a heavy, solid gold fountain pen directly beside it. The chairman has a very specific policy regarding heavily discounted high-risk events. I explain, my dark eyes locking onto Brad's, watching the arrogant light begin to flicker and die. For clients requiring special financial accommodations, Obsidian requires a guarantee of performance. To secure the venue tonight with the family discount applied, you must sign this agreement. Brad picks up the contract, his eyes scanning the dense, complex legal text. His frown deepens into a scowl. A guarantee? What kind of guarantee? I tilt my head, my polite smile widening just a fraction of an inch, revealing the teeth of the trap. Of course. As per the chairman's regulations, you are required to deposit $200,000 into our corporate escrow account within exactly 24 hours. Furthermore, this contract clearly stipulates that the deposit must be entirely collateralized by your personal assets, not your firm's corporate assets, yours. Brad stares at the heavy linen paper, The gold-gilded edges catch the harsh spotlight, glinting like the teeth of a finely crafted bear trap. For a fraction of a second, a genuine flicker of hesitation passes behind his eyes. He is a predator, and even predators possess a basic instinct for danger. But the instinct is immediately suffocated by the crushing weight of his own monumental ego. He looks at Vivian, whose posture remains painfully rigid, her eyes demanding that he assert their family's absolute superiority over the lowly servant standing before them. He looks at Kiara, who is busy checking her lip gloss in the reflection of her silver butter knife, completely unbothered, utterly expecting him to effortlessly swat this minor inconvenience away. Brad lets out a loud, braying laugh. It is a harsh, booming sound that violently rejects the sudden tension in the room. He reaches out and snatches the solid gold fountain pen from the obsidian table with a theatrical flourish. "You think a $200,000 deposit scares me?" "Nia," Brad scoffs, uncapping the pen with a sharp twist. "I spill that much capital on a Tuesday morning. You want a personal guarantee? Fine. I will play along with your chairman's little power trip. But when that money clears tomorrow, I expect you to be standing at the front door of the gala, holding a silver tray for my coat." He does not read a single line of the dense microscopic text outlining the brutal, uncompromising terms of the escrow agreement. He does not see the clauses regarding forensic asset verification or the severe immediate legal penalties for fraudulent transfer. He simply assumes Nia is a bitter, powerless employee forced to hand out standard corporate paperwork. He assumes she is far too stupid to understand high-level finance and far too cowardly to ever actually challenge a wealthy white man in a bespoke suit. Brad slashes his signature across the bottom of the page in aggressive, jagged strokes. He throws the heavy gold pen down. It clatters loudly against the dark stone. "Keep the change," he sneers, rising from his chair and buttoning his jacket. Vivian stands smoothly, shooting one final triumphant glare of utter disgust in my direction before turning on her heel. Kiara follows, linking her arm through Brad's, already loudly complaining about how the air conditioning in the hallway is going to ruin her blowout. They march out of the tasting vault, completely convinced they have conquered the mountain. The heavy oak doors seal shut behind them. The room plunges back into absolute flawless silence. I do not move. I look down at the jagged, arrogant signature staining the pristine white paper. The camera executes a rapid, aggressive cross-cut, slashing instantly from the quiet, dimly lit tasting vault to the interior of a moving vehicle. Brad is gripping the leather steering wheel of his Range Rover so hard his knuckles are entirely drained of blood. The streetlights of the city flash across the windshield in rapid strobe-like bursts, illuminating the heavy, greasy sheen of cold sweat coating his forehead. Kiara is sitting in the passenger seat, scrolling mindlessly through her social media feed, completely oblivious to the catastrophic panic radiating from the driver's seat. She is loudly detailing her plans to hire a personal stylist for the upcoming gala, listing off designer labels that cost more than a luxury sedan. Brad does not hear a single word she says. His heart is hammering against his ribs like a trapped animal. The adrenaline of the confrontation in the tasting room has completely evaporated, leaving behind a cold, suffocating wave of pure terror. He is financially ruined. The immaculate pinstripe suit, the platinum watch, the leased luxury SUV, it is all a hollow, heavily mortgaged facade. He has spent the last 5 years drowning in high-interest shadow loans just to maintain the illusion of exorbitant wealth that Vivian demands and Kiara happily consumes. His personal bank accounts are bone dry. His credit lines are entirely maxed out. His massive over-leveraged mortgage is 2 months past due. He does not have $200,000. He does not even have $20,000 in liquid cash. He swallows hard, his throat dry as sandpaper. If he fails to secure the Obsidian Ballroom, his massive fundraising gala collapses. If the gala collapses, his investment firm will immediately initiate an internal audit of his accounts, and they will discover just how deeply in the red he truly is. He will lose his partnership. He will lose the cars. He will lose the house. And the moment the money stops flowing, Kiara will leave him without a second thought. The camera cross cuts sharply, violently, snapping back to Obsidian. We are no longer in the subterranean tasting vault. We are at the absolute pinnacle of the fortress. The CEO suite. The room is a masterpiece of dark, brooding power, encased entirely in floor-to-ceiling glass, overlooking the glittering, sprawling grid of the city. I am standing by the window. The crisp white hospitality uniform has been discarded. I am wearing a floor-length, heavy silk robe in a deep midnight emerald. Elias stands a few feet behind me, holding a crystal decanter. He pours a measure of rare aged amber tea into a delicate porcelain cup. The steam curls lazily into the cool, climate-controlled air. He took the bait precisely as you predicted. Ms. Vance, Elias murmurs, stepping forward and offering the cup. The psychological profile was entirely accurate. His ego overrides his basic survival instincts. I take the cup, feeling the comforting warmth radiating through the fine porcelain. I look down at the tiny moving headlights on the highway far below. "He had to sign it, Elias." I reply, my voice a smooth, low hum of absolute certainty. He could not refuse the demand. Not with Vivian sitting right next to him. Vivian is a tyrant who worships the appearance of wealth above all earthly things. If Brad had admitted he did not have the cash, she would have destroyed him right there at the table. His toxic pride is the chain around his neck. I just handed him the anvil. The camera slashes back to Brad. It is 2 a.m. He is locked inside his high-rise corner office on Wall Street. The room is dark, illuminated only by the harsh blue glow of his dual computer monitors. His suit jacket is thrown carelessly onto the floor. His tie is loosened, his collar unbuttoned. He is pacing behind his desk like a caged, desperate hyena. He has spent the last 4 hours making frantic, hushed phone calls to every private lender and back-channel creditor he knows. Every single one has denied him. He is too highly leveraged. He is a walking toxic asset. He stops pacing. He turns slowly, his bloodshot eyes locking onto the glowing monitors. Displayed on the screen is the internal financial portal for his private equity firm, specifically the portal for a massive, heavily restricted client escrow account. There is $12 million of highly regulated, untouched client capital sitting in that account. Brad's breathing becomes ragged. He leans his hands on the desk, staring at the blinking cursor. He begins to furiously rationalize the crime in his head. It is just a temporary bridge loan. He just needs the $200,000 to secure the venue. Once the gala happens and the new investors sign their checks, he can quietly slip the money back into the client account before the quarterly audit. No one will ever know. It is completely foolproof. He is a senior partner. He has the override clearance. He sits down. His hands hover over the mechanical keyboard. He types in his executive security credentials. He bypasses the secondary compliance warnings. He enters the exact routing and account numbers for the Obsidian escrow account. He types in the amount, 2000000. He squeezes his eyes shut, grits his teeth, and slams his finger down on the enter key. The camera cuts seamlessly back to the CEO suite at Obsidian. The sky outside the panoramic windows is a soft, bruised purple as dawn begins to break over the city. The suite is completely silent. I am sitting behind my massive monolithic desk, reviewing a digital blueprint for a new property acquisition in Tokyo. A sharp, crisp chime breaks the silence. The notification echoes from the sleek, encrypted smartphone resting on the corner of my desk. Elias, who has been reviewing operational reports on the sofa, instantly looks up. He walks over to the desk, picks up the device, and authenticates the screen. His eyes scan the incoming data packet. A cold, highly satisfied smile touches his features. "The funds have arrived," Ms. Vance. Elias states, his voice ringing with pure clinical precision. $200,000 transferred directly into the Obsidian holding account. I do not look away from my blueprint. "Verify the point of origin, Elias." Elias taps the screen, running the secure routing trace. He lets out a soft, dark chuckle. The trace confirms the funds did not originate from a personal checking or savings account. The routing number belongs to a protected Tier 1 corporate trust managed by his investment firm. It is client capital. He has illegally bypassed his own firm's fiduciary protocols to authorize a wire transfer to a third-party venue. I slowly close the digital blueprint. I reach out and pick up my porcelain cup, feeling the last remnants of warmth in the amber tea. The trap had not simply been about taking his money. I have more money than he could ever possibly comprehend. The trap was about forcing a desperate, arrogant man to commit a fatal, highly trackable felony on my servers. He had walked right through the front door and handed me the exact weapon required to dismantle his entire life. I bring the cup to my lips. I take a slow, deliberate sip. The taste is immaculate. The fish took the bait. I say, my voice a quiet, chilling whisper that commands the entire room. Call the legal compliance department. Execute the protocol. The heavy, soundproof oak doors of the CEO suite swing shut with a definitive, airtight thud. Brad collapses into one of the velvet armchairs opposite Naya's desk, his body practically dissolving. He rips his tie off completely, throwing it onto the floor, wiping a trembling, sweaty hand across his forehead. He lets out a desperate, wheezing breath, looking up at Nia with wide, terrified eyes. "Nia, please." Brad gasps, his voice completely devoid of its usual Wall Street bravado. It is high-pitched, thin, and breaking. "I didn't know the contract had a collateral clause. I didn't even read it. Vivian was rushing me. Kiara was complaining I just signed it to get them out of the room. You have to reverse the wire. If the auditors see that money is gone, I will be disbarred. I will go to federal prison for wire fraud." Nia slowly takes her seat behind the monolithic mahogany desk. She picks up a sleek silver tablet stylus, spinning it casually between her fingers. She watches him squirm with the cold, detached fascination of a biologist observing a microbe under a microscope. "The contract was clear, Brad," Nia states, her voice smooth and entirely apathetic. "Obsidian requires a $200,000 deposit for a Tier 1 event buyout. It also explicitly states that the deposit must be collateralized by personal assets. You signed it. You authorized the wire." "But it wasn't my money!" Brad screams, slamming his hands against his knees in a panic. "I don't have $200,000. I don't have $20,000. I'm completely underwater. The mortgage is past due. Kiara's credit cards are maxed out. I took the money from a restricted client escrow account. I embezzled it. Naya, I committed a felony to pay your venue fee." Nia stops spinning the stylus. She sets it down on the desk. The soft click echoes loudly in the cavernous suite. "I see." Nia murmurs, a slow, terrifying realization dawning in her voice. "You stole client funds to pay for a party." "Yes," Brad cries, leaning forward, tears of pure terror finally spilling over his cheeks. "Yes, I stole it, but I was going to put it back after the gala. It was just a bridge loan. Naya, you're the CEO. You own this place. You have the power to stop this. Reverse the wire. Give me the money back. Please, we're family." The word hangs in the air, heavy, toxic, and utterly repulsive. Nia looks at him. She looks at the man who had stood in her parents' foyer, draped his arm around Kiara, and smirked as Vivian systematically tore her down. She looks at the man who just 48 hours ago had treated her like a worthless, incompetent servant in her own tasting vault. A sharp, perfectly manicured eyebrow arches upward. "Family," Nia repeats. The word sounds like a curse on her lips. "That is an interesting word, Brad. Did you consider us family when you demanded I secure a 40% discount because you thought I was a waitress?" Brad flinches as if he has been physically struck. I was just showing off for Vivian and Kiara. You know how they are. They expect a certain level of performance. I didn't mean it, Nia. I was just playing the game." "And when you told me to make sure my staff didn't spill wine on your investors' shoes?" Nia continues, her voice dropping into a lethal velvet register. "Was that also part of the performance?" Brad shrinks back into the velvet armchair, his face draining of all remaining color. He shakes his head weakly, looking like a man staring down the barrel of a loaded gun. "You see, Brad," Nia states, leaning forward and resting her forearms on the pristine mahogany desk, "I do not play games. I run a business. A highly successful, highly secure business. When a prospective client signs a contract and wires funds, Obsidian honors that transaction. However, when that client explicitly admits to embezzling those funds from a protected trust, that triggers a mandatory compliance protocol." Brad stops breathing. His bloodshot eyes widen in absolute paralyzing horror. "What protocol?" Nia picks up her smartphone from the desk. The screen is already illuminated, displaying a live encrypted communication channel. The protocol where my legal department immediately notifies the Securities and Exchange Commission, as well as the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that a senior partner at your firm has bypassed fiduciary firewalls to commit wire fraud. Nia explains, her voice light, almost conversational. Brad lets out a guttural, animalistic sound of pure panic. He lunges forward, grabbing the edge of Nia's desk. No, 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 Nia, you can't. You can't do this. I will lose everything. Kiara will leave me. I will go to prison. You should have considered that before you stole $12 million of client capital, Nia replies, her gaze locked onto his with an icy, unyielding severity. You built a life on a foundation of lies, arrogance, and stolen money. You thought you could walk into my establishment, insult me to my face, and buy your way out of consequence. You were wrong. A sharp, crisp chime echoes from Nia's smartphone. She glances down at the screen. A small, chilling smile curves the corners of her lips. It appears the transaction has fully cleared our holding accounts, Nia announces softly. She taps the screen twice. The funds are secure. She picks up her porcelain teacup, bringing it to her lips. She takes a slow, deliberate sip, her eyes never leaving Brad's horrified, crumbling face. The fish has taken the bait, Nia murmurs, her voice a quiet, lethal whisper that commands the entire room. She lowers the cup. Call the compliance department, Elias. Execute the protocol. The camera establishes a stark, aggressive angle, positioning itself directly behind the broad, rigid shoulders of Marcus. We look over his heavy, tailored collar, the lens slowly, methodically creeping forward. It pushes past the thick, suffocating tension radiating from his aggressive posture, moving steadily closer to the subject, standing on the opposite side of the long mahogany conference table. The focus sharpens entirely on Nia. Her face is a masterpiece of absolute impenetrable stone. Not a single muscle in her jaw twitches. Her eyes are dark, freezing pools, perfectly reflecting the frantic, chaotic energy of the people desperately trying to break her. The private consultation room at Obsidian is usually reserved for high-level event planning, designed to be a sanctuary of quiet luxury. Today it has been aggressively invaded. Marcus slams his open palm against the polished wood of the table. The sharp, violent crack echoes off the soundproofed walls like a gunshot. His face is mottled with a dark, furious red, his veins bulging against his collar as he attempts to use his sheer physical size to intimidate her. You will fix this right now, Nia, Marcus bellows, his voice vibrating with the unchecked authority he has always used to control his household. Brad came to our house this morning in a state of absolute panic. He told us exactly what kind of malicious predatory operation you are running here. You intentionally slipped him a fraudulent contract. You used confusing illegal fine print to trap him, and you allowed your employers to siphon his personal funds. He is the victim of a targeted financial scam, and you stood there and let it happen to your own family. I do not blink. I maintain a perfectly polite, entirely vacant posture. Brad has clearly fabricated a desperate, pathetic narrative. He did not tell Marcus and Vivian that he is completely underwater. He certainly did not confess to embezzling $12 million of highly restricted client capital to cover a venue fee. Instead, he has spun a frantic fiction painting Obsidian as a fraudulent enterprise and himself as the innocent, persecuted victim. And predictably, my parents have swallowed his lies whole entirely, eager to blame me for his catastrophic failures. Vivian steps forward, pushing past Marcus. She is not wearing her usual haughty, aristocratic sneer. Instead, she has completely rearranged her features into a mask of profound theatrical agony. She clutches a white lace handkerchief in her trembling hands, dramatically dabbing at the corners of her eyes, though absolutely no real tears have fallen. "How could you do this to us?" Vivian wails, her voice pitched perfectly to convey the suffering of a martyred mother. "Brad is the savior of this family. He elevated your sister. He brought us into the highest echelons of society. He gave us respectability. And this is how you repay him, by participating in a corporate extortion scheme designed to ruin him." Vivian reaches out her manicured fingers, gripping the edge of the mahogany table as if she might collapse from the sheer weight of my supposed sins. This is the core of Vivian's existence. Her entire reality is built on the fragile, carefully curated image she projects to the world. And the absolute epicenter of that image is her standing at their affluent, sprawling megachurch. Do you have any idea what this will do to our family's reputation? Vivian demands, her voice dropping into a harsh, frantic hiss. If the congregation finds out that our own daughter is involved in a scandal like this, we will be ruined. We sit in the front pew, Nia. We lead the fundraising committees. We host the charity drives. The shame you are bringing upon this house is unbearable. I will not allow you to destroy our standing in the eyes of the Lord and our community. To reinforce her spiritual manipulation, Vivian steps aside, revealing the man standing quietly in the shadows of the room. It is Pastor Thomas. He is a tall, imposing figure in a pristine, dark suit, a man who has eagerly accepted my parents' heavy financial tithes for years. He has been summoned here to serve as the ultimate moral weapon, a blunt instrument of religious guilt meant to crush my resistance. Pastor Thomas steps forward, entering the harsh overhead light. He looks at me with an expression of deep, rehearsed pity, tilting his head with practiced pastoral concern. Nia? Pastor Thomas begins, his voice a booming, resonant baritone, polished by decades behind a pulpit. Your mother called me this morning in a state of profound spiritual distress. She is weeping for your soul. The path you are walking down is paved with deception and greed. Proverbs tells us that the love of money is the root of all evil. It twists the heart and turns brother against brother. You have allowed the temptations of this wealthy, secular establishment to blind you to the sacred bonds of family. I watch him speak, my expression remaining perfectly blank. The sheer audacity of the performance is almost fascinating. They have marched into my territory completely ignorant of my true power, attempting to use the heavy, suffocating chains of religious guilt to force me to cover up a federal crime committed by their golden son-in-law. You must not let the devil guide your actions. Vivian cries out, stepping forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with the pastor. The enemy is using your bitterness and your jealousy of Kiara to make you do wicked things. But there is always time for redemption, Nia. Ephesians tells us to bear with one another in love, to forgive as God forgave us. You need to march into your manager's office right this second. You need to tell them there was a terrible mistake. You must demand they return the money to your brother-in-law immediately. You have to reverse the transaction before this goes public and destroys our family. Gacy. Pastor Thomas nods gravely in agreement, clasping his hands together over his stomach. It is the only righteous path, Nia. You work here. You have access to the administrative systems. You can explain the error and fix this grievous wrong. Do not let pride harden your heart. Honor your father and mother. Cleanse your conscience and restore the peace to your family before the law gets involved and innocent people are hurt by your pride. The air in the room is thick with their demands, heavy with the toxic, manipulative pressure they have used to control me since I was a child. They expect me to crumble. They expect the weight of biblical judgment and parental disappointment to force me into submission. They expect the quiet, obedient daughter to panic, to apologize, and to frantically attempt to undo the damage. They do not know that the damage is already permanent. They do not know that the Securities and Exchange Commission is already freezing Brad's accounts. They do not know that they are currently demanding that I, the CEO of Obsidian, actively participate in covering up a $12 million embezzlement scheme. I look at Marcus, whose face is still red with aggressive fury. I look at Vivian, who is clutching her lace handkerchief like a holy relic, her eyes wide with manufactured terror. I look at Pastor Thomas, who stands tall and self-righteous, completely complicit in their toxic delusions. I slowly lower my hands. I cross my arms smoothly over my chest, the crisp white fabric of my hospitality uniform shifting faintly in the quiet room. I do not blink. I do not show a single trace of emotion. My voice is entirely flat, devoid of any warmth, any fear, or any hesitation. It is the chilling, robotic tone of an employee strictly following corporate protocol. I am just an employee, I state evenly, watching the confusion instantly replace the self-righteous anger on their faces. I have no administrative authority over financial transactions. I do not have the clearance to reverse a verified escrow deposit. The contract was signed, the funds were secured. That is the end of my involvement. Vivian drops her handkerchief. Her mouth falls open in genuine unscripted shock. You cannot be serious. You are going to stand there and let them steal his money. If your son-in-law truly believes he is the victim of a fraudulent scam, I continue, my dark eyes locking directly onto Vivian's horrified face. And if you are completely certain that his finances are entirely clean and above reproach, I pause, letting the absolute freezing reality of the situation settle over them like a thick layer of frost. Then he should simply call the police. I do not wait for their response. I do not wait for the pastor to quote another scripture or for Marcus to scream another threat. I turn sharply on my heel. I walk out of the private consultation room, my footsteps entirely silent on the plush carpet. I step into the grand hallway and pull the heavy mahogany door closed behind me. The latch engages with a solid, echoing thud. Instantly, the muffled, chaotic sounds of Marcus bellowing in rage and Vivian screaming my name are entirely cut off by the soundproofed walls, leaving me standing in the perfect, undisturbed silence of my empire. The camera cuts sharply from the heavy, soundproof mahogany door to the blinding, artificial glare of a massive LED ring light. Kiara is standing in the center of her cavernous, custom-built walk-in closet. Rows of designer shoes, racks of sequined gowns, and shelves of imported leather handbags stretch out behind her, a towering monument to Brad's stolen, heavily leveraged wealth. She is holding her smartphone at a high angle, staring at her own filtered reflection on the screen with total, unfiltered adoration. The viewer counter in the corner of her screen ticks rapidly upward, thousands of people tuning in to watch her daily display of manufactured perfection. She pouts her lips, adjusting a heavy cascading diamond necklace that catches the harsh white lighting and scatters rainbows across the ceiling. I am just so incredibly exhausted, you guys. Kiara sighs to her audience, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet performative exhaustion. Planning a $50 million gala is literally a full-time job, but Brad and I are so blessed to be hosting it at Obsidian. It is the most exclusive venue in the city. Getting a booking there is practically impossible unless you have serious capital and absolute top-tier connections. But Brad is just such an amazing provider. He handled the venue fee this morning without batting an eye. She steps back, panning the camera down to show off a glittering floor-length silver gown hanging on a velvet mannequin. She runs her manicured fingers over the delicate beadwork, making sure the designer label is clearly visible to her viewers. "This is the dress for tomorrow night," Kiara announces, her tone shifting into overt bragging. "Custom made in Milan. But honestly, the stress of this week has been unimaginable. And I have to be completely transparent with my followers, because you guys are like my family. The hardest part hasn't been the event planning. The hardest part has been dealing with actual family." She pauses, perfectly timing a dramatic downward glance to project vulnerability. She lets out a heavy, tragic sigh, playing the role of the long-suffering saint to absolute perfection. "A lot of you know about my younger sister, Nia," Kiara continues, looking back into the camera with wide, innocent eyes. "I do not talk about her much because it is just too painful. She has always struggled with deep, severe mental health issues. She is incredibly unstable. And unfortunately, she harbors this dark, toxic jealousy toward me and my marriage. It is heartbreaking. We found out she recently got a job working as a server or a host or something at Obsidian. And when she saw that Brad and I were the VIP clients booking the grand ballroom, she completely lost her mind. Kiara shakes her head, placing a hand over her chest as if she is physically wounded by her own lies. "She tried to sabotage the entire event." Kiara lies smoothly, her voice vibrating with fake empathy. "She intentionally messed up our tasting menu. She threw a massive tantrum in the private vault. She even tried to slip Brad some fake, ridiculous contract to try and extort money from his firm. It was the frantic, desperate behavior of a truly sick person. My parents and my pastor actually had to go down there today to pray for her and try to talk some sense into her. But I am choosing grace. I am choosing to forgive her. Brad already secured the real contract with upper management, so her little psychotic episode did not ruin anything. But please keep my sister in your prayers tonight. She needs serious professional help." She blows a kiss to the camera and ends the live broadcast. The second the screen goes dark, the tragic saintly expression vanishes from her face, instantly replaced by a cold, arrogant smirk. She tosses the phone onto a velvet ottoman and turns back to her mirror, admiring her own reflection, entirely oblivious to the catastrophic storm gathering directly above her head. She has absolutely no idea that Brad is not out securing final event details. She does not know that he is currently locked inside his home office, vomiting into a trash can, hyperventilating as he waits for the inevitable knock on the front door. The camera executes a rapid sweeping cutaway from Kiara's closet, plunging deep into the secure subterranean levels of the obsidian fortress. We are inside the executive legal war room. It is a stark, windowless chamber built entirely of black steel and frosted glass designed for absolute operational security. The room hums with the quiet, intense energy of high-level corporate warfare. Nia sits at the head of a massive illuminated glass conference table. She is no longer wearing the white hospitality uniform. She is dressed in a sharp, tailored black turtleneck, her posture completely relaxed, but radiating absolute uncompromising authority. 4 senior corporate litigators sit around the table, their digital tablets glowing in the dim light. Elias stands beside a large interactive monitor mounted on the far wall. The screen displays a complex branching web of financial data red lines connecting bank routing numbers to federal compliance databases. "The trap is fully closed, Ms. Vance," Elias reports, his voice crisp and clinical, devoid of any emotional inflection. "Our forensic accounting team has completed the trace on the $200,000 deposit. We have confirmed with absolute certainty that the capital originated from a restricted Tier 1 client trust managed by Brad's private equity firm. He used his executive override to bypass internal security protocols and execute an unauthorized wire transfer to our escrow account." Nia nods slowly, her eyes tracking the red lines on the digital monitor. "Has his firm's internal auditing department been alerted?" "Yes, Chairman," the lead litigator, a stern woman with silver hair, replies from across the table. "As per our mandatory compliance obligations, we anonymously flagged the suspicious transfer to his firm's chief financial officer 30 minutes ago. Their internal audit team immediately froze Brad's executive access. They are currently reviewing his entire portfolio." "And the federal authorities?" Nia asks, her voice deadly calm. "The evidence package has been completely encrypted and transmitted to the Securities and Exchange Commission as well as the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI. The litigator confirms, tapping a final command into her tablet. "We included the signed Obsidian contract, the wire transfer receipts, the IP address trace, confirming the transaction originated from his personal terminal, and the forensic proof that the funds were embezzled client capital. It is a textbook case of wire fraud and grand larceny. The evidence is irrefutable. They have everything they need to secure an arrest warrant." "Excellent," Nia states quietly. She looks at the screen, watching the digital web of Brad's financial ruin solidify. He had tried to crush her with his arrogant display of wealth, completely unaware that he was stepping into a meticulously designed corporate slaughterhouse. He had handed her the knife, and she had simply allowed him to fall on it. "Ms. Vance," Elias says, stepping away from the monitor and turning to face her. "Brad's legal team will undoubtedly attempt to claim that the Obsidian contract was predatory or misleading. They will try to argue that he did not understand the personal collateral clause." "Let them try," Nia replies, a chilling, razor-thin smile touching her lips. "The contract is standard federally compliant escrow terminology. He signed it willingly in a room with 3 witnesses. His failure to read the document does not negate his legal culpability. And more importantly, his failure to read a venue contract does not magically authorize him to embezzle $12 million of client money to cover his personal debts. His firm will throw him to the wolves to save their own reputation. He is entirely isolated." She stands up from the glass table. The movement is fluid, graceful, and terrifyingly precise. "Lock down all financial records related to the transaction," Nia commands, looking around the room at her legal team. "Prepare our external PR department for the inevitable media fallout when his arrest becomes public record tomorrow morning. Obsidian's name must remain entirely unblemished. We are simply the compliant third party that reported a felony. The lawyers nod in unison, immediately returning to their screens to execute her orders. Nia walks out of the war room, moving through the quiet, dimly lit corridors of her empire. The air is cool and smells faintly of expensive cedar and ozone. She steps into a private biometric elevator. The doors slide shut and the cabin shoots silently upward, ascending toward the absolute peak of the building. The elevator doors part, opening directly into Nia's private, sprawling penthouse suite. The city stretches out below her in a glittering, endless ocean of light. She walks slowly across the dark hardwood floor, entering her master dressing room. It is a space of severe minimalist luxury, sharply contrasting the gaudy, cluttered excess of Kiara's closet. There are no loud logos or cheap sequins here, only impeccable tailoring and quiet, devastating power. Nia stops in front of a massive floor-to-ceiling mirror. She looks at her reflection. She remembers the terrified, weeping 22-year-old girl standing on the sidewalk in the freezing rain, holding a trash bag full of cheap clothes. She remembers Marcus screaming that she was a failure, a disgrace, a burden. She remembers Vivian locking the front door, choosing the illusion of suburban perfection over her own flesh and blood. She remembers Kiara laughing from the upstairs window. That girl died on that sidewalk. The cold rain had washed away every trace of fear, every ounce of desperate need for their validation. Nia reaches out and runs her hand over the garment hanging on the valet stand beside the mirror. It is a bespoke Alexander McQueen suit in a brilliant violet shade of plum red, the color of fresh oxygenated blood. The fabric is heavy, structured, and completely unforgiving. The tailoring is sharp enough to cut glass, designed with broad, severe shoulders and a cinched waist that projects absolute militant dominance. She strips away the black turtleneck. She slips her arms into the silk-lined sleeves of the crimson jacket. The heavy fabric settles against her skin like custom-forged armor. She buttons the front, the sharp lines of the suit instantly transforming her silhouette into a monument of unyielding authority. She reaches into a velvet-lined drawer and extracts a heavy platinum Rolex day-date, the bezel completely encrusted with flawless, brilliant cut diamonds. It is a timepiece that commands instant respect, a physical manifestation of brutal, conquered wealth. She clasps it around her left wrist. The heavy metal is cool against her pulse. Nia looks back into the mirror. The transformation is absolute. There is no trace of the obedient server. There is no trace of the rejected daughter. The woman staring back at her is a predator at the absolute apex of the food chain. She is cold, she is brilliant, and she is holding the executioner's blade. She adjusts the sharp crimson collar of her jacket. Her dark eyes are freezing, bottomless, and entirely devoid of mercy. Tonight she is not Naya the outcast. Tonight she is the chairman, and she is ready to welcome her family to the gala. A smooth, continuous tracking shot glides effortlessly through the grand ballroom of obsidian, capturing a masterclass in modern, unadulterated opulence. The camera weaves gracefully past towering monolithic floral arrangements of midnight orchids and white roses that scent the cool, climate-controlled air. Waitstaff in pristine, razor-sharp black uniforms move like shadows through the crowd, carrying heavy silver trays loaded with crystal flutes of vintage imported champagne. The room hums with the low, steady, and exclusive murmur of extreme wealth. The lens drifts past women draped in shimmering haute couture and men locked in quiet, high-stakes conversations in bespoke tuxedos. It is a perfect, flawless ecosystem of power and privilege. The camera pushes deeper into the glittering crowd, ignoring the superficial glamour, searching for its specific target. It cuts through a cluster of laughing socialites, glides past a string quartet playing softly in the corner, and finally stops dead, locking tightly onto a single, isolated figure. It frames the pale, glistening, and entirely terrified face of Brad. He looks like a man standing squarely on the trapdoor of a gallows, just waiting for the lever to be pulled. His custom-tailored tuxedo, which usually serves as his armor of arrogance, suddenly feels like a suffocating straitjacket. He continuously dabs his forehead with a monogrammed silk pocket square, completely unable to stop the cold, greasy sweat leaking from his pores. Every time a waiter drops a silver fork, every time a crystal glass clinks too loudly, his entire body violently flinches. He is expecting federal agents to burst through the heavy oak doors at any given second. He is running on pure toxic adrenaline and blinding, suffocating panic. $12 million. The number pulses behind his eyes like a blinding strobe light. He embezzled $12 million of restricted client capital. The wire transfer is permanent. His firm's internal auditing department is already tearing through his portfolios like bloodhounds. The only possible way he survives the sunrise as a free man is if he secures a massive, immediate influx of new, untraceable capital tonight. He needs $50 million to balance the books, cover his tracks, and maintain the fragile illusion of his success. Entirely oblivious to his impending doom, Vivian and Marcus are holding court near the absolute center of the ballroom. They are completely in their element, intoxicated by the sheer dizzying proximity to immense power. Vivian is wearing an ostentatious, heavy diamond necklace, laughing loudly and aggressively with a group of affluent, highly influential women from their megachurch's elite inner circle. She gestures grandly toward the soaring, vaulted glass ceiling of the venue, taking complete and utter credit for the immaculate execution of the evening. Marcus stands proudly beside her, his chest puffed out aggressively, holding a heavy crystal tumbler of expensive bourbon. They are aggressively introducing Brad to everyone who will listen, loudly broadcasting his supposed financial genius to the room. They call him their visionary son-in-law, the brilliant mind who single-handedly brought their entire family into the upper echelons of global finance. Vivian reaches out and touches the arm of a prominent, wealthy church elder, whispering loudly about how Brad secured this entire impossible venue without breaking a single sweat. She is completely unaware that her golden son-in-law had to commit a highly trackable federal felony just to get them through the front door. They are parading him around the room like a prized thoroughbred racehorse, completely blind to the fact that he is actively dragging them all toward a catastrophic, inescapable cliff. A few yards away, Kiara is standing near a massive ice sculpture, holding a glass of champagne and entirely surrounded by a small, dedicated army of local influencers and minor socialites. She is twirling for their phone cameras, showing off her custom-made silver Milanese gown. She is loudly complaining about how stressful it is to manage a massive financial empire, acting as if she personally organized the entire gala. She points a sharply manicured finger at a passing obsidian server, snapping her fingers aggressively and demanding a fresh drink, continuing to treat the highly trained staff like worthless, indentured servants. Brad cannot focus on his vain wife or his loud boasting in-laws. The ambient noise of the party sounds like rushing water in his ears. His bloodshot, frantic eyes are locked intensely onto a single, solitary figure standing quietly near the VIP bar. Mr. Arthur Sterling. Sterling is a titan. He is a self-made, intensely private, heavily guarded black billionaire who controls a massive international venture capital firm. He is wearing a flawless, understated midnight blue tuxedo that speaks of generational wealth. His posture is completely relaxed, his expression entirely unreadable and perfectly still. He holds a simple glass of sparkling water, quietly observing the chaotic energy of the room with sharp, highly intelligent and calculating eyes. Sterling is the ultimate white whale. He is the mark. He is the $50 million lifeline Brad so desperately, violently needs to avoid a federal prison sentence and total ruin. Brad takes a deep, shuddering breath, filling his burning lungs with the scent of orchids. He forces a stiff, wide, entirely plastic smile onto his face. He marches across the ballroom, shoving his way past a group of minor investors approaching Sterling with an aggressive, deeply desperate energy. He does not offer polite, standard small talk. He does not ease into the conversation. He immediately launches into a frantic, high-pressure, deeply rehearsed sales pitch. He talks entirely too fast, his words stumbling over one another. He gestures wildly with his hands, spilling a few drops of his own drink onto the pristine carpet. He throws out entirely fabricated profit projections, hyper-inflated return rates, and meaningless corporate buzzwords meant to dazzle and confuse. He corners the billionaire, invading his personal space, practically begging him on his hands and knees to sign the investment paperwork tonight. He claims it is an exclusive, highly restricted, time-sensitive opportunity. He claims the flagship fund will be permanently closed by midnight, and Sterling will miss out on the greatest return of the decade. It is a pathetic, completely transparent display of a man currently drowning in his own lies. Sterling does not interrupt the frantic monologue. He listens patiently, taking a very slow, measured sip of his sparkling water. His dark eyes remain fixed securely on Brad Micro, analyzing the heavy sweat on his brow, the distinct, uncontrollable tremor in his hands, the frantic, erratic shifting of his gaze. Sterling is a man who built a global empire by accurately reading the hidden motives of ambitious men, and he can smell the absolute desperation pouring off Brad like cheap, expired cologne. He does not reach for a pen. He does not ask to see the prospectus. Sterling simply offers a polite, entirely non-committal nod, taking a smooth, calculated step back to create physical distance from the frantic, sweating white man in front of him. Suddenly, the brilliant ambient lights in the grand ballroom gently begin to dim. The low, steady hum of conversation immediately fades into a respectful, expectant hush. A solitary, brilliant white spotlight snaps on with a sharp click, illuminating the raised, heavy obsidian podium located at the very front of the room. A beautifully crafted vintage silver microphone stands ready. Brad's heart violently leaps into his throat, choking off his air supply. This is the moment, the keynote address, the moment he publicly secures the capital and saves his own life. He turns away from Sterling and practically shoves his way aggressively through the gathered crowd. He positions himself right at the very edge of the raised stage, looking up at the podium with wild, desperate, unrestrained hope. He begins to clap loudly, trying to initiate a round of applause to force the momentum in his favor. Mr. Sterling calmly hands his glass of sparkling water to a passing waiter. He casually adjusts his pristine cuffs, ensuring they are perfectly aligned. He steps up the short flight of stairs and walks smoothly and confidently to the illuminated podium. He looks out over the vast, silent sea of wealthy investors, eager socialites, and powerful business magnates. He grips the heavy, dark edges of the podium with large, capable hands. He looks directly down at Brad. Brad is grinning like an absolute maniac, his hands clasped tightly together in eager, sweaty anticipation. He is ready to be validated. He is ready to be saved. Sterling smiles. It is a warm, deeply respectful smile, but it holds absolutely no warmth for the desperate man standing below him. It is a smile of absolute, unshakable control. Sterling leans into the silver microphone. His voice is rich, resonant, and fills every single corner of the massive, silent room perfectly. I am incredibly impressed by the sheer scale and the absolute flawlessness of this evening's event. Sterling announces, his voice echoing with undeniable authority. He pauses, bringing a large hand up to pat the air in Brad's direction. It is a gesture of mild, placating dismissal, the kind of motion one uses to quiet an overly eager, poorly trained dog. Brad's frantic plastic smile falters for a fraction of a second, confusion, briefly replacing his desperate hope. Sterling drops his hand back to the podium. His voice drops an octave, carrying a heavy, undeniable weight. But I must be entirely transparent with all of you tonight. Sterling continues, looking out past Brad and into the dark depths of the ballroom. I did not come here to invest in the fund being presented. The only reason I attended this gala, the only reason I am standing in this room tonight, is because my closest, most trusted business partner personally invited me. The heavy, expectant silence in the grand ballroom hangs suspended in the air, taut and fragile as a stretched wire. Every single face in the crowd, from the wealthiest venture capitalists to the most prominent socialites, turns away from the stage and looks toward the back of the room. The massive, monolithic oak doors of the ballroom swing inward with a deep, resonant groan. The camera shifts into a deliberate, cinematic slow motion. The harsh, brilliant backlighting from the outer corridor spills into the dim, orchid-scented ballroom, casting a long, commanding shadow across the pristine marble floor. Nia steps across the threshold. She is a vision of absolute, uncompromising power. The bespoke Alexander McQueen suit is a brilliant, violent shade of plum red, cutting through the sea of safe, muted tuxedos and pastel gowns like a blade. The heavy fabric moves with fluid, lethal grace, the sharp tailoring exaggerating her broad shoulders and cinched waist. On her left wrist, the platinum diamond-encrusted Rolex catches the ambient light of the chandeliers, fracturing it into 1,000 tiny blinding prisms. She is no longer the quiet, invisible sister. She is no longer the obedient employee in a white hospitality uniform. She radiates the kind of terrifying gravitational authority that bends the entire room to her will. As she begins her walk down the central aisle, the crowd instinctively reacts. The elite of the city billionaires, politicians, and media moguls physically step aside, parting like the Red Sea to make way for the true power in the room. Wealthy patrons bow their heads in quiet, deferential respect as she passes. The rhythmic, sharp, and perfectly measured clicking of her heels against the marble floor is the only sound piercing the dead silence of the ballroom. She does not look at the crowd. Her dark, freezing eyes are locked entirely on the stage ahead. Near the center of the room, the carefully constructed illusion of Vivian and Marcus's life violently shatters. Vivian is standing frozen, a crystal glass of imported white wine halfway to her lips. She stares at the approaching figure in the red suit, her brain entirely failing to process the visual information. She recognizes the face of the daughter she has spent a lifetime degrading, hiding, and apologizing for. But she cannot reconcile that face with the titan currently commanding the absolute respect of the most powerful people in the city. The realization hits Vivian with the physical force of a freight train. Her perfectly manicured fingers simply go slack. The crystal glass slips from her grasp, plummeting to the floor. The sharp, violent crash of shattering glass and splashing wine echoes loudly in the quiet room, but no one, not even the waitstaff, dares to look away from Nia. Marcus stands rigidly beside his wife, the expensive bourbon sloshing over the rim of his heavy tumbler onto his shoes. The arrogant, puffed-out chest collapses. His face drains of all color, transitioning rapidly from bloated pride to a pale, sickly shade of gray. The man who had screamed at her in the consultation room just hours earlier, demanding she obey his absolute authority, now shrinks back into the crowd, instinctively terrified of the woman walking past him. A few feet away, Kiara experiences a complete catastrophic psychological break. She drops her smartphone onto the floor, her live stream abandoned and entirely forgotten. Her mouth falls open in a grotesque mask of pure, unadulterated horror. The manufactured saintly influencer smile melts off her face like wax held to a flame. She stares at her sister's custom-tailored suit, the flawless diamonds, the absolute dominance of her stride. Raw, acidic envy burns the back of Kiara's throat. Her entire identity, built entirely on the premise that she was the superior, successful daughter, dissolves into absolute nothingness in a matter of seconds. But no one in the room is suffering more than Brad. Brad is standing at the very edge of the raised stage, his hands still clasped together in eager, desperate anticipation. As he watches Nia approach, his heart stops beating entirely. The blood freezes in his veins. The pieces of the puzzle aggressively slam together in his mind, forming a picture of absolute, inescapable doom. The server he insulted, the manager he tried to bully, the woman he confessed his federal crimes to in the private consultation room, the compliance protocol, the FBI, the Securities and Exchange Commission. Brad realizes with blinding, suffocating clarity that he did not just sign a contract with a random corporate entity. He signed a contract with her. He realizes that Nia is not an employee. She is the architect of the slaughterhouse he just willingly walked into. His knees buckle slightly. A cold, greasy sweat pours down his face, stinging his eyes. He is not looking at his sister-in-law. He is looking at the executioner, who is about to send him to federal prison for the rest of his natural life. Nia reaches the front of the ballroom. She does not spare a single glance for Brad, treating him with the absolute irrelevance he deserves. She places her hand on the polished mahogany railing and glides up the short flight of stairs with effortless grace. As she steps onto the stage, Mr. Arthur Sterling turns to face her. The cold, unreadable mask of the billionaire titan instantly melts away, replaced by an expression of profound, genuine warmth and deep professional respect. He opens his arms wide. Nia steps into his embrace. They share a brief, familiar hug, the physical confirmation of a long-standing, highly lucrative partnership built on mutual power and trust. Sterling turns back to the vintage silver microphone, keeping one heavy, supportive hand resting proudly on Nia's shoulder. He looks out over the crowd, his voice booming with undeniable authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling announces, the pride radiating through every syllable, "it is my absolute honor to introduce the visionary mind behind this magnificent venue, the woman who single-handedly redefined luxury and security in this city, my closest partner and the founder and chief executive officer of Obsidian, Ms. Nia Vance." The grand ballroom erupts. It is not polite golf clap applause. It is a deafening, thunderous roar of genuine respect and admiration from the most difficult crowd in the world to impress. The elite of the city rise to their feet. The sound washes over the room in massive, heavy waves, shaking the crystal chandeliers hanging from the vaulted ceiling. Down in the crowd, Vivian, Marcus, and Kiara stand completely paralyzed, physically pinned to the floor by the sheer volume of the applause. They are drowning in the horrific reality of their own arrogance. The daughter they threw away is a queen. The daughter they hid in the shadows is the sun around which their entire pathetic social circle revolves. Sterling steps back, smiling warmly, and gestures gracefully for Nia to take the podium. Nia steps up to the vintage silver microphone. She places her hands flat on the edges of the obsidian wood. She does not smile. She does not wave. She simply stands there, absorbing the deafening applause with the calm, unshakable certainty of a woman who built her own empire from the ground up. She waits for the noise to subside, allowing the anticipation in the room to build to an agonizing, feverish pitch. Slowly, the applause fades back into a heavy, expectant silence. Nia looks out over the crowd. Her dark eyes sweep over the sea of faces, finally dropping down to the front row. She locks eyes with Brad, who is visibly trembling, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. She shifts her gaze slightly, locking eyes with Vivian, whose face is stained with black mascara tears. She looks at Kiara, who is violently digging her nails into her own palms. She looks at Marcus, who cannot even muster the courage to meet her gaze. A slow, terrifying, and utterly beautiful smile curves the corners of Nia's lips. It is a smile that promises absolute, uncompromising destruction. She leans into the microphone. Her voice is silk and steel, echoing with crystal clarity through the massive ballroom. "Thank you, Arthur, for that incredibly generous introduction." Nia begins her tone-light, conversational, and completely lethal. "And thank you to every single one of our distinguished guests for joining us tonight at Obsidian." She pauses, letting her gaze drill directly into Brad's terrified, bloodshot eyes. "But before we begin our main program," Nia continues, her voice dropping into a register that commands the absolute attention of every soul in the room, "I want to take a moment to extend a very special, very public note of gratitude to my family." The word hangs in the air, heavy and loaded with poison. "Specifically," Nia states, her voice ringing out like a death knell, "I want to thank my brother-in-law, Brad." Brad lets out a tiny, whimpering sound, completely drowned out by the silence of the room. He shakes his head frantically, a pathetic, silent plea for mercy. Nia does not blink. Her smile widens, sharp and predatory. "Thank you, Brad," Nia announces, her voice echoing off the glass ceiling, ensuring every single investor, socialite, and media outlet in the room hears every single word. "For so generously sponsoring tonight's venue with a $200,000 personal deposit." The collective breath of 500 elite guests catches in their throats. The ensuing silence is no longer expectant. It is suffocating. The visual perspective narrows, pushing in violently on Brad. His face fills the imaginary frame, a grotesque portrait of a man whose soul has just left his body. His pupils dilate until his eyes are completely black. The expensive bourbon in his stomach turns to battery acid. His jaw works soundlessly, resembling a fish thrown onto a scorching dock. He looks up at the woman in the crimson suit, the woman he had treated like a peasant, the woman he had openly mocked in her own building. He finally understands the true scale of his catastrophic miscalculation. Nia does not break eye contact with him. She reaches into the pocket of her tailored jacket and withdraws a sleek, minimalist silver remote. She presses a single button. Behind her, the massive 40-foot LED screen spanning the entire width of the stage flickers. It was supposed to display the gilded, imposing logo of Brad's private equity firm, a visual anchor for his $50 million grift. Instead, the screen floods the grand ballroom with stark, blinding white light. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd as a highly classified, heavily redacted financial document materializes on the massive display. It is a bank wire transfer statement blown up to monumental proportions. The numbers are crisp, black, and undeniable. A thick, glowing red circle highlights the exact sum of $200,000. A second red circle highlights the recipient Obsidian escrow. A third lethal red circle highlights the origin of the funds. The room is filled with seasoned investors, venture capitalists, and financial titans. They do not need an explanation. They instantly recognize the formatting of a restricted Tier 1 client trust account. They immediately recognize the digital signature of an executive override. They know exactly what they are looking at. The low, polite murmur of the ballroom instantly morphs into a sharp, dangerous buzz of absolute outrage. Men in bespoke tuxedos lean forward, their eyes narrowing at the screen. Women draped in diamonds cover their mouths in shock. Arthur Sterling steps slightly to the side, crossing his arms over his chest, looking down at Brad with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. Nia stands perfectly still, letting the visual evidence burn itself into the retinas of every single person in the room. When she speaks again, her voice cuts through the rising chaos like a scythe. When a prospective client signs a binding contract with Obsidian, we conduct a mandatory microscopic audit of the incoming capital. Nia announces, her tone as cold and hard as a diamond. We pride ourselves on absolute financial integrity. We protect our investors, we protect our partners, and we absolutely protect our reputation. She turns her head slightly, her freezing gaze sweeping over the crowd to find Vivian and Marcus. Her parents are physically shrinking, desperately trying to melt into the floorboards. The wealthy church elders they had been boasting to just moments ago are now actively backing away from them, creating a visible, toxic quarantine zone around the disgraced couple. Vivian's face is a mask of pure oxygen-starved panic. However, Nia continues, her voice amplifying, bouncing off the vaulted glass ceiling. Our legal department and our forensic accounting team discovered a severe anomaly. They traced the origin of this specific $200,000 deposit. They discovered that it did not come from a corporate operating account. It did not come from a personal checking account. Nia looks back down at Brad. He is swaying on his feet, visibly on the verge of a total neurological collapse. They discovered that this money was unlawfully transferred from the protected trust account of an entirely unaware retiree. Nia states, her voice echoing with righteous, lethal finality. A vulnerable client who trusted this man with their life savings. He bypassed fiduciary firewalls and embezzled their secure capital simply to pay for a venue fee. The word embezzled strikes the room like a physical shockwave. Kiara lets out a sharp, involuntary shriek. She looks around frantically, realizing that her entire army of local influencers and socialites has turned their smartphones directly toward her. The glowing lenses are recording her absolute unscripted humiliation. The glamorous illusion she had violently fought to protect is evaporating on a public livestream. She is no longer the wealthy, envied socialite. She is the clueless, fraudulent wife of a common thief. As a strictly law-abiding enterprise, Nia announces, her dark eyes flashing with absolute, terrifying power. Obsidian does not tolerate financial predators. We do not negotiate with thieves, and we certainly do not allow our prestigious platform to be used as a staging ground for a $50 million Ponzi scheme. She lowers the microphone slightly, her posture radiating absolute dominance. Therefore, I took the liberty of inviting a few special guests here tonight. Nia says, her voice dropping into a smooth conversational purr that chills the blood. Guests who are incredibly eager to discuss these particular receipts. Right on cue, the massive soundproofed oak doors at the back of the grand ballroom are violently thrown open. The heavy wood slams against the marble walls with a deafening concussive boom. The elegant string quartet in the corner completely stops playing the music, dying an abrupt, awkward death. A dozen federal agents march into the pristine, orchid-scented room. They are wearing dark tactical windbreakers with the bright yellow letters FBI stamped boldly across their backs. They move with rapid, coordinated, and terrifying efficiency. They do not care about the vintage champagne or the haute couture. They cut a straight, aggressive path directly through the crowd, heading straight for the stage. The entire ballroom erupts into absolute, unfiltered chaos. The wealthy elite do not panic, but their reaction is far more devastating. Hundreds of guests simultaneously reach into their imported leather clutches and tailored suit pockets. A sea of glowing smartphone screens instantly illuminates the dim room. Camera flashes begin to pop like strobe lights. They are all recording. They are all capturing the exact precise moment Brad's entire existence is legally and socially terminated. Brad lets out a guttural, animalistic sound of pure terror. He spins around looking for an exit, looking for a shadow to hide in, but he is completely trapped against the edge of the stage. The bright white spotlight overhead pins him in place like a specimen on a slide. Bradley Vance! The lead federal agent barks, his voice carrying easily over the commotion of the crowd. You are under arrest for wire fraud, grand larceny, and the embezzlement of protected client funds. Keep your hands where we can see them. Brad's knees finally give out. He collapses onto the polished marble floor, his expensive tuxedo bunching up around his trembling shoulders. He raises his hands in the air, sobbing openly, a broken, pathetic shell of the arrogant man who had demanded a 40% discount just 48 hours prior. Two agents grab him by the arms, hauling him roughly to his feet. The sharp metallic click of steel handcuffs echoes sharply, a definitive permanent sound that seals his fate. From the back of the room, Vivian lets out a loud, theatrical wail, throwing her arms into the air, as if she is starring in a Greek tragedy. She attempts to run toward the stage, but Marcus grabs her arm, his face twisted in absolute terror. He knows that stepping into that spotlight will tie them directly to a federal criminal. They turn and try to push their way out of the ballroom, desperately attempting to flee the suffocating humiliation. But the crowd of church elders and former friends deliberately blocks their path, turning their backs and refusing to let them escape the shame. Kiara is completely frozen near the melting ice sculpture. She watches the federal agents drag her husband away in handcuffs. The flash of the cameras reflects in her wide, tear-filled eyes. Her custom Milanese gown suddenly looks like a cheap costume. She looks up at the stage, her gaze finally meeting the eyes of the sister she had relentlessly tortured. Nia stands perfectly still at the podium. The bespoke crimson suit seems to absorb the flashing lights of the cameras. She watches the federal agents march Brad down the central aisle, parading his disgrace past the most powerful people in the city. She does not gloat. She does not smile. Her expression is a masterclass in absolute terrifying indifference. She simply watches the trash being taken out of her building. The camera slowly pulls back, capturing the magnificent chaotic tableau. The disgraced family shrinking in the crowd, the federal agents securing their target, the sea of wealthy spectators recording the downfall, and the brilliant, unyielding chairman standing high above them all, untouched and victorious. Nia reaches out and calmly switches off the silver microphone. The swift, sharp click of the power button serves as the final, absolute period to the story of their destruction. The game is over, and the house always wins. The sharp, decisive click of the microphone's power button echoes like a gunshot, and instantly the smooth, gliding, cinematic perspective shatters. The visual style violently shifts, jarring the viewer into a frantic, handheld chaos. The lens shakes and jerks, simulating the dizzying, nauseating panic that has suddenly gripped the grand ballroom. The pristine, controlled lighting seems to fracture as the camera whips around the room, capturing the blurred, frenetic movement of the city's elite scrambling for distance from the epicenter of the scandal. The camera zeroes in, entering a jagged, rapid orbit around Kiara. She is no longer frozen. The psychological dam breaks and she shatters into a million jagged pieces. She begins to scream. It is not a delicate theatrical cry, but a high, piercing, guttural wail that tears at her vocal cords and scrapes against the acoustic paneling of the ballroom. She drops heavily to her knees, completely abandoning any remaining shred of her carefully curated poise. She clutches desperately at the bodice of her custom silver Milanese gown, her sharply manicured fingernails tearing violently at the expensive shimmering fabric until the threads snap and fray. Her perfectly contoured influencer-ready makeup streaks down her face in dark, ugly rivers of mascara and foundation. She writhes on the marble floor, wailing directly into the blinding, relentless flashes of the dozens of smartphone cameras surrounding her. The digital audience she had spent years cultivating is now actively broadcasting her absolute, unscripted destruction to the world. A few yards away, the federal agents haul Brad forward. His patent leather shoes slip wildly on the spilled wine and shattered crystal coating the marble floor. The overwhelming, suffocating terror that had paralyzed him just moments ago suddenly morphs, combusting into toxic, unadulterated rage. As the agents drag him violently past the shrieking, pathetic form of his wife, something inside Brad completely snaps. The polished, Harvard-educated, polite white son-in-law vanishes entirely, instantly replaced by the venomous, deeply racist and arrogant predator he has always kept hidden beneath the surface. He stops dragging his feet and plants them firmly against the marble, using all his remaining adrenaline to fight the federal agents just long enough to twist his body around. He glares down at Kiara, his face contorted into a grotesque, snarling mask of pure hatred. He unleashes a torrent of absolute, unfiltered filth. His voice tears through the ambient noise of the room, harsh and dripping with venom. He screams that he never loved her. He bellows that she is nothing but a vapid, brainless, gold-digging leech who was only good for a tax write-off and cheap arm candy. He laughs maniacally, a harsh barking sound that makes the surrounding guests flinch in genuine disgust. He tells Kiara that she is a pathetic hollow shell of a woman, a joke of a human being who was so blinded by the shiny objects he dangled in front of her that she could not even see the massive, glaring federal crimes happening right under her artificially lifted nose. The federal agents yank hard on his arms, attempting to force him toward the exit, but Brad thrashes wildly, turning his vitriol toward Vivian and Marcus. The thin, polite veneer of racial tolerance he had maintained for years incinerates. He calls them pathetic ghetto trash, desperately trying to play dress-up in a world they will never, ever belong in. He weaponizes their background, their skin color, and their desperate, clawing need for validation. He screams that they are nothing but uneducated, gullible fools, the easiest marks he had ever conned in his entire life. He spits viciously onto the marble floor near Marcus's shoes. He yells that he only tolerated their loud, tacky, and embarrassing presence because their blind, worshipful arrogance fed his own ego. He tells them they were a sideshow, an entertaining circus act. He mocked ruthlessly with his real wealthy friends behind closed doors. He screams that they deserve this public execution just as much as he does because their sheer, unadulterated greed and their desperate need to be seen as elite made them complicit in their own destruction. He tells Vivian her fake piety makes him sick to his stomach, and he tells Marcus he is not half the man he pretends to be. The grand ballroom recoils in collective horrified disgust. The true ugly nature of the golden son-in-law is laid entirely bare under the harsh lights. The cameras continue to flash, capturing every vile racist syllable, ensuring that his social and professional annihilation is permanent and recorded from every conceivable angle. The federal agents finally lose their patience. They muscle him forward with brute force, practically carrying him off his feet as they drag his screaming, thrashing body out through the heavy oak doors, hauling him away into the flashing red and blue lights waiting in the corridor. The heavy doors slam shut, but the silence does not return. The room is buzzing with frantic, breathless whispering and the relentless clicking of smartphone cameras. Vivian stands frozen amidst the wreckage, the acidic insults still burning in her ears. She looks around frantically, her chest heaving as she realizes the sheer, unrecoverable magnitude of their social death. The wealthy church elders, the elite women she had spent hours boasting to, are staring at her with expressions of absolute, unshielded revulsion. She is completely isolated, standing in the center of a toxic quarantine zone. The panic threatens to stop her heart. Desperate to escape the piercing, judgmental stares, Vivian resorts to her oldest, most reliable, and deeply rehearsed weapon. She decides to become the ultimate victim. She gasps loudly, a dramatic theatrical intake of air designed to draw immediate sympathy. She clutches her chest with both hands, her face twisting into a mask of sudden, overwhelming agony. She rolls her eyes back into her head and lets out a fragile, trembling moan. She sways dangerously on her high heels, leaning backward, fully engaging in the performance. She is entirely confidently expecting the soft, cushioned arms of Sister Margaret and the other wealthy megachurch ladies to instantly rush forward, break her fall and smother her with prayers and smelling salts. She falls backward through completely empty air. The church ladies do not step forward. They actively, aggressively step back. They pull their expensive gowns out of the way, their faces twisted in absolute disgust, refusing to let Vivian's collapsing form touch them. Instead of reaching out to catch her, they raise their smartphones higher, making sure to get a clear angle of her descent. Vivian hits the cold, unforgiving marble floor with a heavy, violent thud. The impact knocks the breath entirely out of her lungs. The sheer physical shock of the fall pales in comparison to the devastating psychological blow. She lies flat on her back, staring up at the glittering crystal chandeliers, her chest heaving as she gasps for air. She waits for the rushing footsteps. She waits for the concerned voices asking if she needs a doctor. She waits for the validation she has fed on her entire life. No one moves. Not a single person steps forward to help her. The socialites and investors simply step around her, stepping over her legs, as they maneuver to get better camera angles of Kiara crying nearby. They treat Vivian like contaminated waste, a piece of discarded garbage sullying the pristine floor of obsidian. The realization crashes down on her heavier than the marble beneath her back. The fake faint did not work. The manipulation has failed. She has been entirely, brutally abandoned by the very society she destroyed her own flesh and blood to join. The humiliation is absolute, suffocating, and total. The handheld camera violently pans away from Vivian's pathetic form, seeking out the final pillar of the disgraced family. It finds Marcus. He is standing completely alone, shaking violently. His expensive, bespoke tuxedo suddenly feels like a lead straitjacket dragging him down toward the floor. He watches his golden boy, the man he worshipped and praised, dragged through the doors screaming racist obscenities. He watches Kiara, his favorite flawless daughter, tearing her own hair out on the ground in a puddle of spilled wine. He watches Vivian, his partner in vanity, lying abandoned and ignored on the cold stone. His entire worldview, the arrogant, superficial empire he built on lies and favoritism, crumbles into fine, worthless ash in a matter of seconds. The crushing physical weight of the shame presses down on his chest, making it nearly impossible to draw breath. The people he had begged to impress the billionaires and politicians he had desperately tried to network with all night are now looking at him as if he is a diseased rat that somehow managed to scurry into the ballroom. Marcus looks up, his bloodshot, terrified eyes seeking the only remaining anchor in the room. He looks toward the raised stage. Nia is still standing at the podium. She is bathed in the harsh, unforgiving white light of the massive security screen displaying Brad's financial crimes. She stands tall, unbothered, and completely untouched by the chaos churning beneath her feet. She is an untouchable monolith of absolute power. A primal, desperate survival instinct overrides every single shred of Marcus's remaining dignity. The man who had screamed at Nia in the back room, the man who had demanded she fetch him a drink and threatened to have her fired completely, breaks. He swallows the bitter, acidic taste of his own shattered pride. He shuffles forward. His legs tremble so violently they barely support his weight. He pushes past the disgusted investors, his shoulders hunched, his head bowed. He approaches the raised stage with the pathetic, broken posture of a starving beggar crawling toward a throne. He stops at the bottom of the short flight of stairs, unable to summon the courage to step onto the stage. He looks up at Nia. He looks up at the daughter he threw away, the daughter he starved of affection, the daughter who now holds the absolute power of life and death over his entire existence. Tears of pure, cowardly desperation leak from his eyes and track down his trembling cheeks. He reaches out a shaking, pathetic hand toward her, gripping the edge of the stage. "Daughter, please!" Marcus begs, his voice a pathetic, rattling wheeze. "Save your brother! Save the family's face!" The camera angle shifts sharply, dropping down to the cold marble floor. It points upward, capturing a stark, imposing low-angle shot of Nia. From this perspective, she looks like a towering, insurmountable monument of power. She looks down at the pathetic, trembling man gripping the edge of her stage. Marcus is weeping openly now, the tears tracking through the greasy sweat and sheer terror on his face. He repeats the words, his voice cracking, begging for the family face to be saved, begging for the very reputation he had just spent the entire evening loudly attributing to a federal criminal. Nia does not smile. She does not frown. The terrifying predatory amusement from moments ago completely vanishes, leaving behind a blank, featureless mask of absolute zero. There is no trace of anger, no lingering resentment, and absolutely no pity. Her silence stretches out heavy and suffocating, acting as the most devastating weapon she possesses. She lets him hang there in the quiet, agonizing void of her indifference. The elite crowd watches in absolute, breathless fascination as the patriarch of the disgraced family begs at the feet of the titan he clearly never knew. When she finally speaks, her voice is quiet, steady, and entirely devoid of warmth. "Family?" Nia asks. The word sounds foreign on her tongue, sterile and clinical. "You want to invoke the concept of family now, Marcus." She takes a single slow step closer to the edge of the podium, her dark eyes pinning him to the floor. 9 years ago, Nia states, her voice ringing with crystal clarity over the hushed whispers of the ballroom. "It was my 18th birthday. I baked a cake myself because Vivian refused to buy one. I was sitting quietly at the kitchen table, and Kiara came home screaming, intentionally blaming me for stealing her designer watch to cover up the fact that she had pawned it for party money." Marcus flinches physically as if struck by a heavy, invisible blow. The memory hits him vivid and inescapable. He remembers the anger, the shouting, the blind assumption of her guilt. "I tried to tell you the truth." Nia continues, the absolute calmness of her tone, making the words cut infinitely deeper. "I begged you to listen to me. But instead of listening, you grabbed my birthday cake off the table and threw it directly onto the floor. You forced me onto my hands and knees to clean up the shattered frosting while you comforted her. You told me I was a liar, a thief, and a permanent stain on your perfect household. You completely destroyed my birthday simply to protect her convenient, transparent lies." Vivian lets out a strangled, pathetic sob from her place on the floor, but Nia does not even glance in her direction. She keeps her freezing gaze locked securely on Marcus. "And now," Nia says, gesturing gracefully toward the empty, shattered space where Brad had just been dragged away by federal agents. "You dare to stand in my building and ask me to save your face. Your reputation has not been ruined by me, Marcus. Your precious, carefully curated social standing has been completely and utterly pulverized by the golden child you worshipped and the brilliant son-in-law you practically prayed to as a deity. They did this to you. I simply provided the lighting." Marcus drops his head, his hands slipping weakly from the stage. He collapses back onto his knees, utterly defeated, completely broken by the inescapable, crushing truth of her words. He cries into his hands, a hollow rattling sound that elicits absolutely no sympathy from the surrounding crowd. Nia shifts her gaze. She looks past the broken shell of her father and fixes her eyes on Kiara. Kiara has stopped wailing, but she is shaking violently. She is clutching the frayed edges of her ruined dress, staring blindly at the massive LED screen that still broadcasts Brad's federal crimes. The horrific reality of her situation is rapidly and violently setting in. As Brad's legal spouse and the primary beneficiary of his stolen wealth, she knows exactly what is coming next. The frozen bank accounts, the seized assets, the brutal, highly publicized foreclosure on her pristine mansion, the absolute unrecoverable destruction of her influencer empire. She is going to lose every single thing she has ever claimed as her own, and she will be universally despised by the millions of people watching her live stream. Nia looks down at her sister, her expression entirely clinical. "Do not look for me," Nia says, her voice carrying the absolute finality of a closing vault door. "Do not try to find my address. Do not attempt to reach out through my corporate office. Do not ask for financial assistance when the federal government rightfully seizes your assets by morning. Kiara looks up, her face a smeared, grotesque canvas of panic and despair. She opens her mouth to speak, to beg, to try and manipulate her way out of the dark, terrifying abyss she is currently staring into, but her vocal cords completely fail her. This is the permanent end of our association, Nia states, delivering the final lethal blow with surgical precision. My number is blocked. Without waiting for a response, without sparing another second for the people who had spent a lifetime treating her like discarded garbage, Nia turns on her heel. The heavy, flawless fabric of her crimson suit flares sharply as she pivots. She steps away from the vintage silver microphone, leaving the massive LED screen glowing brightly behind her. She glides down the short flight of stairs with the same effortless, predatory grace she had entered with. As her polished heels touch the marble floor, the crowd of billionaires, venture capitalists, and powerful elites instantly reacts. The entire ballroom, filled with the most influential and difficult figures in the city, physically parts for her. They step back in total reverent silence, clearing a wide, unobstructed path toward the exit. Powerful men bow their heads respectfully, acknowledging the absolute undisputed queen of Obsidian. Nia walks straight through the center of the parted sea. She does not look back at her weeping father on his knees, her shattered sister shaking on the floor, or her mother lying abandoned in the shadows. She simply walks forward, her sharp heels clicking rhythmically against the marble, leaving the smoking, ruined ashes of her former family far behind her. The camera follows her from behind, tracking the steady, unbroken rhythm of her stride down the grand corridor. The heavy oak doors close, completely muting the distant sounds of wailing sirens and shattered egos. The sharp, authoritative click of her heels against the marble floor serves as a steady metronome, ticking away the final seconds of her past. Suddenly, the sharp click of a heel seamlessly transitions into the crisp, delicate clink of a crystal wine glass being set down on a polished slate table. A flawless match cut shifts the scene completely. The oppressive, chaotic energy of the grand ballroom vanishes, replaced by the serene, soaring tranquility of a top-floor penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows offer a panoramic, glittering view of the city skyline at night. The camera begins a slow, deliberate pull back, taking in the immaculate modern art, the low, warm lighting, and the quiet intimacy of the space. Nia's voiceover cuts through the quiet room, calm, reflective, and entirely at peace. Brad pleaded guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud and embezzlement, Nia states, her voice echoing smoothly over the sweeping city views. The federal judge did not offer any leniency for his Ivy League pedigree or his tailored suits. He was sentenced to 8 years in a federal penitentiary. The financial wreckage he left behind triggered a mandatory seizure of all marital assets. The camera continues its slow, steady retreat, revealing the plush velvet sofa in the center of the vast living room. Kiara lost the mansion, the cars, and the carefully curated social media empire within a matter of days. The voiceover continues. Without a single dollar to her name, she had no choice but to move back into my parents' cramped, aging house. Now the three of them live entirely on top of one another, suffocating in their shared disgrace. The wealthy church elders and elite socialites they spent their entire lives desperately trying to impress now treat them like a contagious disease. They are entirely exiled from the only world they ever cared about. The camera pulls back far enough to frame Nia. She is sitting comfortably on the sofa, dressed in elegant, understated silk loungewear. The tension and armor of the red suit are gone, replaced by a radiant, unshakable serenity. Beside her sits a handsome black man with deep, intelligent, and profoundly warm eyes. He smiles, a genuine expression of absolute respect and adoration as he leans forward to pour a splash of vintage red wine into her glass. He is her equal in every sense, a true partner who built his own success and who looks at her not as a stepping stone, but as a queen. Nia accepts the glass, sharing a quiet, loving glance with him that speaks volumes of their shared peace. She turns her head slowly, looking directly into the lens of the camera. The city lights reflect perfectly in her dark eyes. She offers a small, knowing, and completely contented smile. They used to tell me I was a failure with no space in that family, Nia says, her voice quiet but carrying the undeniable weight of absolute victory. So I just had to buy the entire building. The screen cuts instantly to pitch black. A single word fades into the center of the darkness in sharp, pristine white lettering. Obsidian.